Mr. Chair?
Yes, sure can.
All right. I did think that was a little abusive, but nonetheless, happy to be here on day 2. And as you described, I thought I'd give a little bit more flavor of kind of who I am and recognizing what we do in our spare time and with our employer provides us a bit of bias, hopefully good bias nonetheless. So I think, is Anna controlling the slides? Very good, very good. Next slide, please. Well, this is the headquarters of Northern Water. So this is where I am at present. We're located just north of Berthoud. We built a campus here about 19 years ago after being in Loveland for many, many years. And we're expanding that campus as we speak in anticipation for growing Northern Water to accommodate additional responsibilities for a couple new projects that we're advancing here in Northern Colorado. We have about 150 staff here in Berthoud, and we combined that with a staff of about 22 in Grand County that with all of us working, spending time working with Reclamation to cooperate the Colorado Big Thompson project. Next slide, please. So just briefly, what does that mean for our constituents? Would span essentially from the city and county of Broomfield on the southern part of our borders up to Wellington, north of Fort Collins, and east to Julesburg at the state line, where there's just a little bit over 600,000 irrigated acres that we provide a supplemental water supply to, primarily from the West Slope, as you likely all know. And we have about 1.1 million constituents that live within this boundary, including the larger communities of Boulder, Longmont, Greeley, Fort Collins, and Loveland, and then further east, Fort Morgan and Sterling. Getting that water to citizens anyway often is done by treatment facilities that are either coupled directly with the CBT project, or over the years, Northern Water has created enterprise to put in pipelines to get that water, in some cases, further south or to the southern part of our district or further east. Next slide, please. Moving forward, I won't make this about Northern Water-centric themes, but I couldn't resist telling you more about myself and Northern Water, but also mentioning yesterday was a big day at Northern Water related to the Windy Gap Firming Project. What you see on the screen there is a newly created dam associated with Chimney Hollow Reservoir, which is the preferred alternative of building the Windy Gap Firming Project. So this firms Windy Gap supplies, also obviously coming from the West Slope. So what you're seeing is the pipeline. Penstock on the center right of the screen is the kind of the iconic foothills penstock that brings water from the West Slope. That is being, again, federally owned by Reclamation. That is going to be tied into the new Chimney Hollow Reservoir. Why I talk about this being a big day, actually yesterday, the dam height reached 175 feet. That's a special number for us here at Northern Water and also for Grand County. That 175 feet triggers the third settlement payment to the Grand County Foundation that was associated with an agreement during litigation that committed additional dollars, $15 million to Grand County Foundation to invest in the Colorado River, again, as settlement for litigation around the firming project. So we reached that elevation yesterday and funds are en route, as I understand it. And we've got another probably year and 2 or 3 months before the project's complete. Next slide, please. So, again, we all have biases, so I spend what little extra time I have on a farm in eastern Colorado in the winter months. It doesn't look like winter in this picture. This is last weekend. We custom graze about 800 mother cows that come from Hartselle, spend their time high in the mountains at about 9,300 feet. They come down to eastern Colorado, and we custom graze those over the winter months, and it's getting late in the season. They'll be trucked back to Hartselle here in the next few weeks or so. And they are, next slide, please. We move them every couple weeks. A lot of temporary fence going on to new paddocks of Cover crop, primarily, as you'll see in the upper left, that's a turnip and radishes and rye, kind of a drug of choice for a pregnant cow. They do their best to get those out of the ground, and it's we've been doing this for about 10 years, and it's a good step away from work on a Saturday morning to keep these cows moving from place to place to get some new feed. Next slide. It's that time of year. We're getting ready for tillage. Probably about 60% of the acres in northeastern Colorado, if it's pivot irrigated, have a tendency to strip till, and that's the implement on this tractor, where you're just tilling a very narrow strip, about 7 inches in width, in which you plant seed in Morgan County, Logan County, Sedgwick County, most of Weld County. That crop is usually related to corn production, some sugar beet production, but just tilling that small little strip preserves the integrity and the improved soil quality everywhere else in the field. And it's reduces energy consumption, certainly saves on moisture as well. And again, that's you'll see most of the sprinklers in eastern Colorado, you'll see these very narrow strips, and that's the machine that that does that. Next slide, please. So I did want to mention one event I attended 2 Fridays ago. That was just a great event. I hadn't been for a few years. It's called the Poudre River Forum. It was held this year in Greeley in the lower right. It was held at the Ames Community College, and I'd not been to their new Welcome Center. It's just a phenomenal facility, a great place to have a gathering of 2 to probably 250 people in this case. The Poudre River Forum's been in play for probably about 12 to 15 years. In recent years, it's co-sponsored between the Cache La Poudre National Heritage Area and a group called the Poudre Runs Through It Working Group, which was a group put together by the Colorado Water Center probably about 12 or 13 years ago, and I sit on that board. They come together once a year and have a forum. Among other topics, the cost of water was a theme at this gathering, which really emphasized the tremendous cost of water to new home buyers in particular, and how that's driving trends and what developments look like. There were some values presented that calculated for a new home in northern Colorado, given the current cost of water that embedded within a mortgage payment, that cost of water could be up to $125 per month as part of your mortgage, just given costs of water. And you can imagine that's encouraging developers to think differently about landscaping, which I might suggest is not a bad thing, to try to reduce that water requirement for new home developments. And on the far left is a celebration at that same gathering of the Poudre Pioneer Award. And this year that was given to Mr. Randy Gustafson, a long time employee of Greeley, who probably knows the Poudre as well as anybody does. And we celebrated his retirement from the city of Greeley. And I think lastly, as our board meets this morning, as we speak, in fact, this time of year, particularly in March and into April, they evaluate the hydrology within our service area as related to how they allocate water from the Colorado Big Thompson project. And although snowpack is critically important, we all get that. My view in northeastern Colorado, that you really need to couple decent snowpack with coming into the irrigation season with good storage and good precipitation. And you will see that we find ourselves in northeastern Colorado anyway in a pretty good spot with storage throughout the state engineered districts, if you will, 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, to 2 and 64 at being 115% of average. So things are really looking good. That full storage has allowed this winter, coupled with a really mild winter, for a lot of groundwater recharge to take place, which as an added supply to irrigators and some municipalities in northeastern Colorado. They've got a good amount of that water run this winter as well. And then not surprising, given the storms we've had. This does not include, of course, the storm we're experiencing right now, but the precipitation also is across the board has been north of average, except for far northeastern Colorado and Sterling, and perhaps this storm might bring them right at average. So things are looking very good in northeastern Colorado. And Mr. Chair, that's all I have to present today.
Thank you, Brad. Are there any questions for him? Yes, Director Sakata.
Thank you, Chairman Felt. Thanks, Brad. Welcome aboard. I'm really excited to have you here, and I really feel like it'll be an asset to the board. One other thing I'd like to mention is at the Pooter Forum, it was interesting when to me the question they asked about what's the least expensive source of water, and it really surprised me that it's still by and dry. You know, I thought conservation would have been number one, but I think that's where our efforts, anything that we can do for water sharing agreements. I know at the South Platform, they formed a special municipality committee, and I really asked them to look at that. What are the barriers to water sharing agreements that the cheapest water still isn't just by and dry?
Thank you, Robert. I maybe want to add on to that, but kind of back to the savings from conservation. I think often we recognize the investment of changing our landscape, and we tend to only want to apply that cost to the next year or two of savings. And I think we need to do a better job of evaluating the present value of that savings over future years. And I think that's when it starts making sense. Although you've got to find a way to still fund that yard activity to ultimately reduce the need for water in our landscaping.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, that was great. Guess I'm up next, and it's interesting as you were talking, I had this light bulb went on that I've been this winter, for some reason, I've been eating a lot of turnips and parsnips and radishes, and I never have before, really. Maybe I'm a reincarnated pregnant cow. I'm not sure, but it's a strong drive that I have, and been really enjoying it. So I'll have to explore these custom feed approaches a little more.
Mr. Chair, we'd love to house you in northeastern Colorado moving forward in the wintertime.
Perfect. Thank you. As I looked at my Google Calendar over the last 2 months or so since we last met, the thing that struck me the most about it was the number of water meetings, conversations, forums, and things that I've been involved in. Really, it feels like I'm spending more time on this type of stuff than I am on commissioning Chaffee County or being a fly fishing outfitter. And I guess I just hope that is, in some way leading to my next phase of life. Many of you know I'm term limited at the end of this year, so I'm looking for my next role, and I'm feeling more and more certain that that's bound to be in the water world. So I guess my calendar is just a reflection of that growing direction for me. We've had some good stuff going on here in the Arkansas. Many of you may know Jim Broderick, longtime director of Southeastern, is stepping down, and we have completed the interviewing and hiring process for our board there, and we hired Leanne Noga to be our next executive director. She started out as a receptionist about 20 years ago. She realized if she wanted to, sort of improve her situation as an employee at the district, that she needed more education. And so while raising 3 children, she put herself through a bachelor's degree and then went on to get a master's in, I think it's finance, public administration, so that she could become our finance director. And now ultimately she is executive director of Southeastern. So it's just a really cool success story for a local girl growing up in Pueblo to end up in this situation of sort of having the oversight on Twin Lakes, Turquoise, Pueblo Reservoir, the Arkansas Valley Conduit, the Voluntary Flow Management Program. Just really phenomenal, a unanimous vote of our board. And so we're really starting a new era. We'll have our first board meeting with her in charge next week. And really appreciate all the great work Jim's done over the years. And wish him well as he heads into retirement. The Arkansas Valley Conduit is really moving along. Those folks who went to the Arkansas River Basin Water Forum last week probably drove past part of the conduit. They're welding these pipes together into one continuous heavy duty plastic pipe and burying it as they go. But we're, thanks to, once again, thanks to the initiative of the CWCB board and staff prior to my arrival, really, in large measure, that local, I mean, it's state, but relatively speaking, local match really motivated, I think, the federal side of the funding equation, and that pipeline is really moving forward. And I think it's going to be done way before I ever thought it would be. So that's really exciting, and everybody on this board and staff should be proud of that, because it's going to really make a difference in Southeast Colorado. Up here in the upper Arkansas, we've Robert mentioned by and dry. We've got a few of those situations, some of them sort of persistent revegetation challenges from many years ago, and some new ones that are moving through water court right now. And I think while probably nobody ever wants to see that kind of thing, because we know that there's very few people that aren't strong supporters of agriculture, frankly, in Colorado. It does happen, and I've been working for my entire 7+ years now as commissioner to try and resolve a problem on the Hill Ranch. It's just been a disaster, where a ranch was dried up and then sold off into little parcels before they did the revegetation. So we're working with about 42 different landowners to revegetate their property while they're living there, and may have animals, may have kids with dirt bikes, you name it. It's been a real challenge, but I think we're finally coming together with Pueblo West, who is the receiving entity on the water from that ranch, and coming up with a revegetation plan, and about 15 more years of retained jurisdiction that will hopefully get us to a place where we have a sustainable re-veg in that central, very visible part of Chaffee County. But the cool thing about it is it's brought it into focus much more for our county and our population, and one that's going on right now. In fact, I think we talked about Tri-View yesterday a little bit, and we were filing a statement of opposition to protect in-stream flows on Cottonwood Creek up by Buena Vista. But we've been working hard and effectively, I think, with Tri-View to not repeat the mistakes of the past, and really build out a program that's sustainable, that does require a long-term participation by the receiving entity, but also I think will have the best outcome for the community here. So while I'm not going to be able to complete the Hill Ranch project in my 8 years, I think I will be able to leave that one in a place where future commissioners can just check the boxes, and they know what they got to do. And everybody's kind of working towards the same goal. Same with Tri-View. So when you have these situations, sometimes that's the best outcome. It's just a good, clear plan for the future, and a way to make sure that land doesn't become a problem for others. Also, out here in the Upper Basin, this board approved funding for a joint groundwater study with Upper Ark, the county, and USGS, and that's moving forward. We've got all our observation wells, I think, plotted out, and we're working with landowners now to get permission to do that. But we're looking at trying to map the maybe you'd call it the water balance of our groundwater, how quickly it recharges and how much there is. And we're also, because we're going to be looking at some of the constituent elements of that water in order to be able to date it. So to be able to determine, is this, I don't think we have like fossil water up here really, but is this water that's been underground there for, 40 years, or is it all in the last few years and a much more fluid situation? As we look at those, some of those isotopes like tritium, we decided to go ahead and also check for that full spectrum of PFAS emerging contaminants. We don't think that that's a big issue up here, but it's something to get a good baseline on and sort of prepare for the future and know where we are. So been a lot of conversation about that one. I did mention the water forum last week. It was great to have Robert there and Kate. They were the two keynote speakers for that forum. Robert mentioned me talking. I filled in for Cleve Simpson on the kind of intro dinner the night before the forum really started. And so anyway, this board was well represented down there. And when we meet in La Junta, we alternate around 4 different communities throughout the basin. But when we meet in La Junta, we tend to focus on agriculture. And I thought there was just some excellent presentations about agriculture and revegetation, and what really well attended, like so many other water type meetings these days. A lot of people there, a lot of new faces, and a lot of younger people. So just a really great trend. And then talking about sort of maybe broadening our net and helping more people become more fluent in some of these conversations. Jayla didn't mention it yesterday when we had some words from her about Water Education Colorado, but another project she's working on with me right now is kind of like what she was doing with legislators. We're building out about a 5-hour program for the next CCI conference, which will be right after Memorial Day. We've had more and more interest from county commissioners across the state to really build their sort of foundational water knowledge. And so we're putting together kind of this Water 201 program with a lot of speakers, and just really excited to be able to bring some quality water education to the folks who do most of the land use planning, right, in this state, the people who are kind of there trying to fit all the pieces together and build sustainable futures for especially our rural communities. So excited about that one. I really appreciate her help and enthusiasm on that. For myself, just personally, some of you know my wife has had foot surgery back in November, and it's kind of been a real challenge. It ended up getting infected, and she's been struggling for quite a while, but it's finally really turned around, and she's been taking some walks and stuff. It's kept us pretty close to home, but we're going to be heading out to Hawaii here in a few more weeks. Our close friends out there are having their 50th wedding anniversary, so they asked us to come out and be a part of that celebration. So looking forward to that, kind of turning the corner here with spring, although it looks more like winter than any day so far this year. And yeah, I think things are looking up in the Felt household, and really happy to see it. So that's it for me. Anybody have any questions before we move on? Yes, Director Greenberg.
Just wanted to comment, Director Felt, that you did a fantastic job welcoming us to the Lower Arc Basin Forum last week, and I think you really set the tone for the following days. So just want to appreciate your words that evening.
Thank you. That was what do they call that? Operating without a net or something. I had about 48 hours to put together that talk, and they told me Cleve was going to talk for 45 minutes. And I said, man, I got about 15, I think, but it ended up being 45 minutes long. So I really ought to shut up because I know I keep talking way too much, but thank you for that, Kate. If nobody else has anything, we'll move on to Director Brody and the Denver Metro report.
Thanks, Director Felt. So when I got home yesterday evening, I jumped on our snow day planning call for Denver Water, where our emergency operations folks walk all of our leaders through all of the critical functions that need to continue to happen no matter the weather, and to ensure that all of our folks had the personnel and the equipment and the resources they needed. And it was just a good reminder of frankly, all that I get to take for granted, and frankly, all that many of us get to take for granted, sitting in our warm homes with electricity and water and internet. So I just wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge all the folks who are out there working today across the state, whether you're operating a treatment plant or working in the grocery or ag space to ensure that we all have, food on the shelves and all the essential supplies and items that we need. And just want to thank everyone who is out there working in this weather, so that we all get to enjoy what Colorado has to offer. Also want to welcome our new and returning colleagues. It's a real privilege to sit around the table, whether it's a physical table or a virtual table, and look forward to continuing to learn from each of you and get to engage in idea sharing and dialogue around the many important issues that we get to work on together as a board. So welcome and look forward to continuing the conversation. And with that, if we could go to the next slide. So I know we spent a lot of time talking about wildfire preparedness and also mitigation strategies. And I wanted to brag on one of my Denver Water colleagues for just a minute, who testified in front of the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee earlier this week. Madeline McDonald has been an appointed member of the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission alongside our own Dan Gibbs. Madeline was one of 2 commission members who was selected by her colleagues on the commission to testify about the work and recommendations of the commission. And you see Hickenlooper on the right asking her some questions. So I want to thank Madeline, not just for representing Denver Water, but for representing our state really well and for highlighting the importance of wildfire and frankly watershed health preparedness, and helping to raise these issues to our representatives in Washington to hopefully continue to invest in this area. I know it's something that is near and dear to the CWCB and our friends, around state government, and hope that, and I know Colorado will continue to be a leader in this space. So it's always good to be able to work in partnership with folks at the U.S. Forest Service, as well as the state and private landowners as well, to protect our forests and our watersheds. Next slide, please. Also wanted to just acknowledge and celebrate the passage of SB 2405. This was formerly called the Prohibitions on Certain Landscape Practices. At Denver Water, we affectionately refer to it as the Happy Medians Bill, because it really is about removing non-functional turf from areas where it doesn't serve any purpose. So think of medians, right-of-ways, commercial areas in some cases as well, where the only time people are walking on the grass is to mow it. Here are a couple examples of projects that we've been involved in. On the left is Einfeld, which is one of our facilities where we replace grass with a bunch of native plants. On the right is a tree lawn that Denver Water removed the grass as part of our lead reduction program, and we've been doing a pilot where instead of replacing turf, where at the homeowner's request, we're replacing the grass with native landscape materials. So just an opportunity to, again, celebrate the passage of that and thank our legislators for their leadership, and thank the state and others, Western Resource Advocates, for their partnership and collaboration on this bill. We were really excited that it was one of the first to pass this session, and I understand there will be a bill signing tomorrow, Kelly. So that's really exciting.
I
Um,
might just chime in. I'll note that it seems like anytime that we want to meet with the legislature, bring them out into the field to see some of the non-functional turf projects Denver Water has led on, or do a bill signing related to turf, there's usually a good foot and a half of snow the day before. So that you can't actually see any landscaping. But yes, the governor is, I know the governor is excited to sign Senate Bill 5, and we really appreciate Denver Water's work on that bill, amongst others, like Western Resource Advocates and Business for Water Stewardship, that really pitched in to get that over the finish line, and working with the General Assembly as well on it. So
Thanks. And I think there's one more slide. So unfortunately, we didn't get to do the tour of the hydro building and of CSU. So I thought I'd just share a few photos to hopefully, as a teaser, to tempt you to come back. These are from the third floor where Denver Water has our primary water quality lab. So the picture on the bottom, those are windows that are looking into our lab. And for members of the public, we really just wanted to highlight some of the opportunities in the water space, at least in a public water utility. The picture on the top in the middle is an area for young children to just get to pretend and play and learn about what happens in a lab, and all of the cool experiments that we get to do. CSU is meant to be a public facing space. It's the first time, we've had a lab where people can walk by and see our scientists at work. As Jayla talked about yesterday, it really isn't just about the physical space. It really is about coming together of industry, the nonprofit sector, and higher ed, to figure out how we can all work together and collaborate, whether that's on water, whether that's on food, animal health. So we're thrilled to be a part of it, and look forward to the opportunities that being co-located will provide as we think about how to advance research, how to advance the science, and also how to advance policy together. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Brody. Any questions for her? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to Director Combs and the Rio Grande report.
Okay, thank you. If it's right, I'll just share my screen. If that'll work. I think we can get that set up. There we go. So I'll tell you, my office is, I've told everyone, it's on Main Street. It's right on the corner. And so everybody can see it. Everybody can come in. And so I thought, I'm going to stay home today so I don't get interrupted. And then, I don't know if you know this, but where I live here, there are Amish families all around us. I mean, all the way around us. And so every time one of their horse and buggies go by, my wife's little dogs go nuts. So I don't know what's going to be more distracting, the dogs, or if I should have been at the office. I was going to tell you, one of the highlights this last month, we went to the Snow School for Water Managers there in Silverton. Carl Wetlaufer and Jeff Derry puts that on there. And we snowshoed out all across that basin over there. Saw the Senator Beck site, all those things. It was interesting. I had a conversation with the guy that was kind of arguing that the rivers were being mismanaged because of the differences in the hydrographs. He was using for his data points the fact that here in our basin, generally, we're getting a very equivalent amount of moisture. However, he did not understand the timing of our moisture is significantly different. With the snowpack being our #1 provider of actual usable water, it's interesting to learn. There's a lot that we gained in those 3 days there in Silverton. But one of the biggest things I learned is, as we're looking at the way this snow melt goes out, and as we've always kind of done a retroactive look for forecasting. We're finding out that, and NRC said there in the red, that's Carl Wetlaufer, one of the Loffer, I think, sorry if I'm butchering the name there, one of the head modelers for the stream flow and forecasting, and talking about how NRCS is going to start building what they're calling super snow tells, realizing that we have a deficit of information as far as soil moisture and soil conditions affect the meltout. As we're going into this aridification process in the Southwest, we're seeing that when those conditions under the snow are significantly drier, it really has an adverse effect on the amount of usable water. And while the gentleman that was complaining about water management had statistics showing that our inches of precipitation weren't significantly different, the timing was. We're getting a lot in our basin, we're getting a lot more rain on those shoulder months of our season, and they're not really providing water that actually influences stream flows. They don't come in quantities that actually produce growth of our crops. And so while it's measurable, it's not effective. And we're realizing we're gonna have to manage better and better how we do the snow. If you look, we dug some pits and did a bunch of measurement. The gentleman in the back is making sure no one attacks, that everybody's safe while everyone else does the digging. That's me, that was my role. I took the supervisory position there for a while, just to make sure everything was good. And then they caught me slacking. So you see where they put me on the front line digging down there in the very front. But we dug a pit there that was about 6 feet deep. And it was interesting. All of the work that I've personally done for the district and the basin on streamflow forecasting, I did not realize that until the entire snowpack, top to bottom, goes what they call isothermic, which is all one temperature, do we start melt out. And so it was interesting. Jeff was showing us the layering and the effect and then the timing. And of course, if you look at the far left, there's no dust on snow layers here. And then immediately after the class, we got all those big winds that really brought the snow. So if any of you ever are interested in learning more about what provides the majority of Colorado's water through snowpack, I can't stress enough the information you get out of this snow course. We did classroom work in the morning and then snowshoot all over the place in the afternoons, and it really made me appreciate the internal combustion engine, I'll tell you that. I was looking and I thought that's what it felt like right there all day long. Didn't find any real gold, but that's what it felt like all day packing that stuff around. On a serious note, like has been alluded to earlier in the meetings, the Rio Grande Compact Supreme Court oral arguments are March 20th, and there's quite a few of us from the Rio Grande Basin going out there. And to assuage everyone's fears, yes, I know I can't talk there. Okay, I got it. So I won't embarrass the family there. But I think just as a show of support of how important it is for us to kind of hold, even though our compacts have some, there's some struggles in managing the compacts, and as supplies tighten up, we hear all the issues that we need to deal with. But I think this one is very, very important to us, where we've got the federal government who is not a signature to the compact inserting themselves for a management role. It's a little bit interesting. We're not sure where that lies out. For us personally in the Caneos Water Conservancy District, we are the only significant sized reservoir that was built post-compact. So and it was built by the Bureau of Reclamation, so we am from it, but we don't know how that's going to affect operations of these federal facilities, if that's where the federal government wants to insert themselves. There's a lot up in the air, so a lot hinges on this decision for us in our basin. Another thing we're doing is here, we're getting all of our ARPs, which are called the annual replacement plans. The sub-districts here in Division 3 have to submit a replacement plan every irrigation season for how they will address the depletions the well pumping is causing to the rivers day by day. They account for their supplies, they account for how many forbearance agreements they have, those types of things. And then that's submitted by April 15th. The state engineer's office approves them, and then we can start operating those plans. As part of that, the RGDSS, which is the model for Division 3, We're getting into phase 7 of that, which is significant because when the rules went into effect, when they went through court and were approved, we were on phase 6. And there were significant stipulations and arrangements that the Division of Water Resources made with the several opposers that before phase 7 rolled out, they would have addressed certain concerns. And so we're working tightly with DWR on getting all that done so that we can keep progressing the effectiveness and improvements on that phase 7. And I think Jason Ullman, when Mike Sullivan retired, it got handed to Jason Ullman, and I got to take my hats off to him. He has been, you talk about drinking from a fire hose, he has been doing an excellent job of getting caught up on that and trying to keep that flowing as smoothly as we can. So I wanted to give him a shout out on that. Finally, our Rio Grande Basin Roundtable, we're doing a tour. We've invited members of the Southwest Roundtable in that area. We're going to be tomorrow on Wolf Creek Pass to dig another one of those snow pits with Jeff Derry. So that's March 15th. Tomorrow we'll be doing that. And like I said, if we're trying to collaborate a little bit more as we do tours to invite some of the surrounding roundtables where they might have an interest in what we're doing and what we're looking at. So that's what we did there. Director Wind, as you were showing the pictures of your tractors, I had to my dad's 88 years old now. And so he was born in 1936. He and I were talking last fall, and he was talking about when he was born, World War II hadn't even started. He remembers being a sophomore in high school before the Rural Electrification Act brought power to his house out there on the farm where he grew up. And so all the things that he's seen in his life, of course, now my brother and I, we run the farm, and with GPS and with newer equipment and stuff, my dad's just not able to run the tractors and stuff as much. However, last fall we resurrected one of the dinosaurs so he could run a little bit. So I want to compare and contrast that shiny new John Deere that Director Winch showed. This is a 1972 Versatile 900, which is a big 4-wheel drive, 425 horsepower tractor. This is my dad getting to run it last year. So just as a closing, I thought it interesting as we move fast and we do all of this studying and this learning and trying to improve and adapt. I guess to me, I was very nostalgic of how we're standing on the shoulders of those that have gone before us, and especially on this board when I look at the policies and the practices that we're benefiting from, the money that's been put in the right places, whether it's water plan grants, WSRF, any of it. I just want to express my appreciation for the work that everybody's doing on behalf of Colorado Water. It was great to see everybody yesterday. Found it interesting, Paul, that you're finally able to attend, so we all leave. That seemed a little ironic, but I'm very, very glad that things are turning around for you and you're able to get out and do more of the things you like to do. And Director Cloud, I just wanted to finish. I hope that the weather is very good tomorrow for you for the activities at the Capitol, and I hope you have a great weekend. Other than that, that's all I've got, President Phil.
Thank you, Director Combs. Are there any questions for him? Yes, Director Sakata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Combs, just thank you to your leadership, and also pass that along the thanks to your roundtable. As I've had the opportunity to listen in all the roundtables, it's really amazing what you guys are accomplishing there. And I think it's great that you're reaching out to other roundtables now to include them. I think your enthusiasm will boil over into them, and I'm really excited about that. So pass along my thanks to all the Heather and all the roundtable members for everything that they're doing. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate that.
Okay, next up, we have the Yampa with Director Brown.
Good morning, everyone. I got some comments yesterday from people saying that I made the smart choice by staying at home. And I want to tell you that I often panic about the weather, which because I've lived here so long is odd to me that I have gone in that direction, but yet I do. And normally I overreact. I'll just be honest about it. So I was sort of glad that I made the right decision in one way. And as I told Kelly, Jackie won universe 1 million, because it never seems like I nailed that one, but I was happy to not be contending with I-70 last night, and hope you all are home safe and sound. And staff is tucked into their homes as well. I know over at Tri-State, we, like many of your utilities, have a lot of employees, especially our linemen that are out and getting things done and dealing with the consequences of high winds and storms. So shout out to them too, and the work that they do every morning, rain or shine, wind or snow. So wanted to mention that. I was a little hard pressed to come up with new items since our last board meeting. The snowpack continues to roll along here in Northwest Colorado. We're a little bit above average. March can be the snowiest month for our neck of the woods up here in Northwest Colorado. So certainly appears to be holding that trend. We're not getting this massive storm that you all are. I think we only got 10 or 11 inches at the top of Steamboat Resort last night, and everything's closed due to high winds. So, we continue to muddle through, and with any luck, we'll continue to get some good snow through this month, and maybe even some rain this summer, and that would be great. But really glad that we approved the lease out of Stagecoach. That's an important piece of the puzzle for us in Northwest Colorado. As I know those of you who were on the board when you came last March to visit us up here, we talked a lot about how we try to maneuver our water storage, especially for the dry months. And we continue to do that better and better as the years go by. So we'll see what this year holds, and grateful for the Yampa River Fund that's continuing to help grant money towards those releases, both out of Stagecoach and when necessary out of Elkhead. So other than that, roundtable, our Basin Roundtable met last night. So rolled right out of this Zoom meeting into that Zoom meeting. It felt like 2021 a little bit, but my roundtable continues to be really interested in Big River issues, and they spend a lot of time talking about their thoughts and ideas when it comes to really every aspect of the Colorado River negotiations. And I think that's great that we have that interest. And so also thank Amy Ostiak for participating in that meeting last night and giving some updates. Hopefully we'll see some of them on we won't see them, but hopefully they'll join the YouTube for some of the Colorado River updates that we have a little later today. But other than that, I'm going to cede my time and just say, we're happy up here to be receiving snow, although I think everybody's a bit antsy for spring at this point. So we get to that point as mountain people with 4 feet of snow in our front yard and think, oh, the beach would be nice right about now. So anyway, thank you. And I guess I would be remiss, just really excited to work with Brad and John, and even more thrilled that we get to keep Robert Cicada on duty, because I don't know who would be catching all of the items or updating us on all the meetings. And so, I can't think of a better transition. I've gotten to know Brad just a little bit when we went on the Yampa River Awareness Project trip, and just think the world of him. And John, we've crossed paths for so long that I'm just really excited to have both of your knowledge, experience, and input as we move forward on the board. So welcome and congratulations to Nathan in his vice chairmanship role.
Thank you, Director Brown. It's great to see you and hear you. We missed you yesterday, truly. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you next meeting in the Upper Colorado. Any questions or comments for her? Okay. Let's go to Colorado River Main Stem with Director Boucher.
Thank you, Chairman Felt. I don't know the possibility of this for everybody, but if it's possible to put me in speaker form on Zoom for the screen, I'm gonna take you guys on a little tour. I think you'll have some fun with what I'm about to show you. So Director Combs, thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you for stepping up for leadership for vice chair. I always struggle between the words coincidence and ironic about returning to a meeting that then is canceled, but it was great to see everybody for a little bit. We only ended up getting about 3 inches here, which for an upslope, I think is relatively common. You guys will kind of have to guide me with what you can see. So this is the ranch, and we've been boarding Bar Lazy J Guest Ranch horses for 24 years. This is what it looks like when horses and elk all feed together in a feed line. So the horses are scattered to the left, and then those are all elk kind of balled up on the right. And I can't see my own screen somehow. So you guys, let me try and see if I can figure out how to see my own screen.
Viola, can we pin this to the main screen instead of the agenda stuff?
Yeah, give me a second here.
Oh yeah. Can you guys see this now in speaker view? Can you see it on the big screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So you can probably see a little better, but the horses are all scattered, and then those are elk. It was, this is our third winter, a pretty good snowpack for low elevation. And 3 winters ago, the elk really started coming down here on the river bottom harder than we'd seen them in a long time. And I think the ones that got used to snacking with our animals return. It's not quite the same down low as it has been the previous 2 years. But there's a good 75 or 80 of them. That's a pretty decent bull trotting towards us, if you can see those front 4. It's interesting, but it's cohabitation here at Reeder Creek Ranch. So I realized I could get myself in trouble last night, but I didn't even think that Berthoud Pass could have been closed, because when I started driving, I trust the map function on my phone, and it wouldn't even give me the option of Berthoud Pass. So I was committed to I-70, and before I got to the Georgetown exit, my phone binged that I-70 was closed. So I flipped a U-turn at Georgetown, and I took Berthoud Pass the opposite direction. I thought it was really odd. I saw some snowplows on the off-ramp to I-70 the other direction. So it might make some sense that maybe Berthoud Pass was closed, because it was a pretty wild trip. But nonetheless, made it. And, I'll go through a couple messages of hope. But I think that anytime it's March and we're seeing snowpack of this magnitude in our state, given the issues we work on, it's pretty exciting. So this is our Lower Ranch headquarters. And then you're about to see some bulls and our saddle horses here coming up. And the original homesteader down here was the Hildebrand family, and the cabin on the other side of the house. That's still the cabin of the original homesteading family. Crossing over now what is the KB Ditch, which is the largest ag diversion on the main stem Colorado River in Grant County. And then you're about to see why I love working on water issues so much. Here's my favorite river. No offense to everybody else. But here's the main stem, just above the confluence of the Troublesome, starting to open up from from ice. Yesterday when I was coming up, it's still pretty ice packed above the confluence of the Williams Fork. Williams Fork releases a little bit of warmer water, so things start to melt out a little bit. But what I thought was pretty neat yesterday, for a number of reasons, it was 21, 22 years ago, Lurleen Curran Underbrink started dragging me around by my ear to water meetings when Denver and Northern were working on their firming projects. And then when I was talking to my brother driving up the hill yesterday, it was a very amazing moment for me to be sitting between Director Wynn and Director Brody on the policy board, the best water agency in the state of Colorado, discussing policy issues and working on grants together and where we've gone. And congratulations, Director Wynn, on Northern's milestone yesterday. It's a pretty incredible project. I'm amazed every time I hear about it. I look at it, I see photos of it. And it reminds me, of the importance of ongoing collaboration in our state. And I, like Jackie, kind of struggled for much of an update from the last meeting, because really West Slope, the only conversation that's occurred in the last 2 months is really surrounding Shoshone. West Slope communities and counties are, working hard on fundraising plans and financial plans to fund the other West Slope partners portion of what the commitments were. And then, I think a kind of a nice reminder of this, that there we go. Just to reiterate the importance of working on that whole project, with a statewide lens, and the importance of what it means for all of us from the West Slope to the Front Range. And, that I really feel that when it comes to broader Colorado River issues, the rest of the basin is watching us. And I think that we are such great leaders, led by our fearless Commissioner Mitchell, and our unity in the state represents such an important piece of the puzzle for all of that. And beyond being honored to sit between Director Wind and Brody, I also wanted to share how excited I am for Director Wind and Director McLeod on the board. Pretty neat moment. I've always looked at Director McLeod as a mentor of mine, and I'm sure many on the board have. And so I'm ready to rock. So thanks to everybody in the kind words. Good to be back home. And it's hard to say if Berthoud Pass was closed. I still don't know. I will say, of white knuckle drives in my life, that one would rank up there. It was snowing so hard that I could only make it about 5 to 10 minutes with the windshield wipers working, that the snow accumulation at the bottom of the wipers was so substantial I'd have to pull over and clear all the snow out because the windshield wipers had quit working. I got down to Granby and they were saying that there were reports that it was coming down at one point at about 4 inches an hour. And I'm not sure I actually would disagree with that in certain moments of where I was. So good to see everybody, and thanks. And with that, I'll conclude my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Boucher. Any questions for him? I would say I gave him a ride to his truck after the meeting yesterday. We parted ways under fair skies and dry pavement. And it was, I don't know if you experienced this, Paul, but going up I-70, like from Apple Jacks up to 470, it was kind of like a flash flood coming down the interstate. It felt like an inch of water across all lanes, just flowing downhill. And, it gave me a sense of foreboding that was still just down in Denver, basically. But my trip was pretty smooth. His took at least twice as long. Did you go through that too?
Yeah, so I was actually a little bit delayed because when I started the pickup, modern technology indicated that I had a low tire, which was pretty awesome. So I limped around trying to find an air compressor that would actually fill to the capacity of a 1 ton with 10 plies, 70 pounds. Not a lot of those right there in the Denver area where I was. So I was probably 30 minutes after you, and that rain had turned into a sleet storm. So there was about 3 inches of solid sleet with just kind of tire tracks in between it. The good news for when I hit it was that everyone was driving very slow. So it wasn't much of a safety hazard at the time, but that transition, and there was some pretty good lightning going on at that same time. But yeah, there's a lot of weird things about that drive, Director Felt.
Well, we're glad you made it home. Let's go on to San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores with Director Cloud.
Thank you. I really don't have pictures or a presentation. One day I'm still going to be able to do that because I feel left out. Everybody's got dynamic photos to show, but I'll get there. So what like everybody else, I don't have a whole lot to report on because everything's kind of been the same up until this snowstorm. Everyone was taking advantage of the good weather, so they started plowing their fields and getting ready for irrigation system or the irrigation season. I know, but most of the water is going to be turned on around April 1st. Ute Farm and Ranch is getting ready to start irrigating, I think on April 1st, and then everybody else kind of after that. But I know that I was looking at the weather this morning at home and looking at some of the cameras. We only got rain. So I'm hoping that we get some snow in our area. We need it. So I'm hoping that we do get that. And I think going back to irrigation season, the canals are starting to get some water in them to get them filled for irrigation system, which is good. It's been unseasonably warm because usually it was kind of like spring season in February. Birds were singing. It was like way too warm, unusual. So hopefully some of the animals got time to hibernate before they start venturing back out again. So we'll see what that kind of looks like towards the, I guess, the middle of the summer when things really start to heat up. I know for my tribe, Southern Ute, we're getting ready for fire season because that's always a concern in our area, especially when we didn't get much moisture as we want. So I know fire season is something that we all should be aware of as we go forward as well too. But the other thing I do want to say is reading the San Juan, San Miguel, I'm gonna start saying San Dolores because we're gonna be the holy land of the state with all the sands in my area. So I'm renaming it San Dolores. But anyway, we are again, Southwest Conservation District is holding their conference. I know many of you are attending. The title of the conference is Navigating the Water of Innovation, and it's March 27th, held at the beautiful Sky Ute Casino Resort on the Southern Ute Reservation. So I look forward to having you all come, and hopefully we can spend a little bit more time together in person while we're there. We have some good panelists speaking at the conference, and other than that, I don't have much else because it's been pretty quiet in my area, which is good.
Thank you, Director Cloud. Any questions for her? I guess I would say I was reviewing that speaker list for your conference the other day. Quite a few people that are on this board and in this meeting are a part of that list. And I'm going to attend for the first time, but I'm excited about it. Looks like a great conference.
Yeah, well, we can't wait for you all to come down to our area. Hopefully we have some good weather for everyone. I know that the proposals for the upper basin and lower basin to the Bureau of Reclamation has been the topic of a lot of the discussions going on. So hopefully that's something that we can also talk about at the conference and see how that pans out. But other than that, like I said, everything's been quiet, so let's keep it that way.
Understood. Thank you. All right, let's go to the Gunnison and Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if that, whoops, someone else is sharing, it seems. So let me try it again. Here we go. One of the benefits of having a large federal project in the neighborhood is that our friends at Reclamation do a good job of keeping track of our snowpack. So as you can see, this year we're doing pretty well. The dotted line is the median. The green is last year, which was a banner year, of course. And here we are in the blue. We're doing pretty well. We're above median snowpack, and it is snowing now, so this should improve slightly. All is well there. Blue Mesa Reservoir, which is the largest reservoir in the state of Colorado. I thought you might have some interest in the forecast for the reservoir. Currently, we're at 562,000 acre feet, which is about 62%. The maximum fill this year will be around 707. They're forecasting that. And then at the end of the year, down to 578. Now, this release is part of the operating plan for the reservoir. They do that every year because at 7490 elevation, it's called the icing target. And the reason that the reservoir is lowered to that level every year is to prevent ice jams in the Gunnison River in the city of Gunnison. So it looks like a pretty decent year. We'll end up the year with about 85% total. Upstream reservoir is Taylor Park Reservoir, which is owned by jointly, well, the water is owned jointly by Uncompahgre Valley water users in the Upper Gunnison District. The April-July inflow there was 91,000 acre feet, which is 95% of average. We're going to look at about maximum fill of 85%, an end of year total of about 70%. So things are looking good in the hydrology in the Gunnison Basin. I want to pivot a little bit to the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. I don't know if Steve has talked about this in the past, but with the new infusion of cash, our PEPO work has really been exciting. We've got a water education grant program where we provide grants of up to $1,500 to anyone engaged in water education for children up to the age of 18 years. We want to teach the importance and the value of water to our young folks in the basin. Last year, we awarded 6 grants, and they were very successful. We got reports from each of them at the roundtable. The PEPO committee is also supervising a great quarterly newsletter that comes out electronically every quarter. And last year we had a newspaper campaign that was a series of articles every other month. This year, we've started our grant program again, and we've just started advertising for applicants, and I guess the interest level has gone up because of the success last year. Our newspaper campaign this year will be a letter to the editor of all the local newspapers, going through a variety of topics once a month to keep the public alert and aware of water issues in the basin. Let's see if I can switch here. Yesterday, when Robert Sakata showed us the ag census, it was disappointing to see how much of the ag land has disappeared. And so I want to talk a little bit about an organization that has been in Gunnison since 1995. I've been on the board since 2003. This is a nonprofit organization, and what we do is represent landowners in putting conservation easements on their property that preserves working agriculture. We have at this point put under easement in the Gunnison Basin about 60,000 acres of ranch land. We are still active. We have 4 projects underway right as I speak. As you can see, our basin is primarily federal land. The green is all of the irrigated agriculture that exists in Gunnison County. And you can see from this the amount of land that we put under these working agriculture easements. And so Legacy is working hard to preserve working agriculture, at least in Gunnison. So,
John, I'm afraid we're not seeing your map.
Oh, let me try again. Well,
I think you have to stop sharing the original. There you go.
How's that? Can you see it now? Yes?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, well, as I said, you can see that most of Gunnison County is federally owned land. The green is all of the irrigated agriculture in our county. But we've made some significant progress, and as I said, we continue to put these easements in place with a number of easement holders. We do not hold the easements, we just work with the landowners provide the closing costs, the appraisals, and the baseline work that needs to be done to accomplish the easements. So that's all I have for today, unless you have questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for him? Okay. Let's go to our final report here, North Platte with Director Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say how thrilled I am to be reappointed for a full 3 years and look forward to working with Director Wynn, Director McLeod, and all my existing colleagues on the board. I've learned a lot in a year and feel like we've engaged on some really tough topics for Colorado water and will continue to do so. Turning to the North Platte Basin Roundtable, in front of you is a drawing or a map of the North Platte Basin. You'll note it's not just Jackson County, but includes a slice of Larimer County, where the Laramie River is also involved in flowing north into Wyoming and is part of the U.S. Supreme Court decision on the North Platte River. Our next roundtable is next Tuesday. We haven't met since October, so I don't have much of an update regarding the roundtable itself, other than the water supply reserve account project that we all approved yesterday. If you can go to the next slide, please. On the left shows a map that was created in 2001 to give those of you who are not familiar with the North Platte Basin. This is just the Jackson County portion. In dark green, you see wilderness area. In lighter green, you see U.S. Forest Service. In blue, you see state forest. The purple is irrigated acreage. And in the heart of the basin is the Arapahoe National Wildlife Refuge in dark red. And you see also a lot of BLM in yellow. So our county is over 65% public land. And also, I don't have a map to mimic what Director McLeod just showed, but a substantial portion of the existing ranches have been helped by Colorado Cattlemen Land Trust to put their ranches in conservation easement, which is an important protection for the open space and wildlife habitat, as well as the ag that they represent. On the right, I asked Aaron Light to provide me with some of the data for our water use for ag. The map on the left was generated in 2001. You'll see 106,000, almost 460 acres irrigated. And you can see the variation over the years. Last year, I'm sorry, 2 years ago was 105, 636. The 2023 numbers aren't quite ready. As you remember, the Supreme Court decision adjudicating the amount of water that Colorado can take out of the North Platte is 145,000 acres. The 3-state agreement associated with the ESA recovery program at Platte, Nebraska is 134,000 and change. And you can see our irrigated acreage is considerably under that. Part of it is, according to the ranchers and the history in our basin, is due to a number of the ranches moving from small ranch family ownership into ownership by fairly deep-pocketed owners who are not pushing the irrigation as hard, making money not only on hay and cattle, but also on outfitting for fishing and hunting. Also in the decree, we have a maximum allowed per year. And you can see in the second column, the amount of water stored. Very few years did we hit that max. And actually 1 year we were over and had to compensate for that in the following year. And finally, there is a trans-basin diversion to Fort Collins, which Fort Collins manages. And it is expressed as the number of acre feet allowed over 10 years. And as you can see, most years less than the 6,000 average per year that 60,000 over 10 years would indicate. So that's a little snapshot of ag and ag water use in our basin. If we could go to the next slide, please. I had the pleasure and thanks CWCB for supporting my attendance at the Water Reuse Symposium in Denver, Monday and Tuesday of this week. I couldn't attend the whole because of conflict with our meeting, but it was really helpful for me to learn more about reuse. It was not only municipal and stormwater reuse, but also industrial reuse. So I sat through what they called Water Reuse 101 on Monday, 2 different sessions. And one of the sessions, there was a very good speaker on climate change. And I know I bring that up often in our meetings, but I just thought I'd show you a few graphs to underscore what's happening to our globe. So this is January monthly global surface air temperature. And you can see 2024 is the hottest January for air temperature globally. And this is done the non-Arctic and Antarctic 60 to 60 average. But on the right, you also see sea temperature anomalies where the dark red is, as you would imagine, the hottest. If you can go to the next slide, please. This graph is really striking. I'm a scuba diver, love the ocean, and take a look at the average daily sea surface temperature in black in 2024. Amazingly above anything we've seen historically. I had the pleasure to spend a week on the beach in Costa Rica. This is a sunset shot on the Pacific. That water was so hot, it was unpleasant to get into. And I have never been on a seashore where I wasn't driven to be in the water. And as you all know, the sea temperatures in Florida last year were so hot, it killed off most of the coral recovery programs that have been running for 10 to 15 years. And this is just to underscore that we all are challenged by what's happening with climate change. And I'm going to bring it back to Colorado, if we can go to the next slide. The keynote speaker at the symposium was Pete McBride, who most of you must know, a native of Colorado and a Nat Geo explorer. He's been to every continent on the planet. And he started his 1-hour multimedia talk in the Himalayas, talking about the roof of the world and the snowpack. But he brought it home to Colorado. The next slide, please, shows an aerial photograph he took in Colorado of dust on snow, which we were hearing about just a little bit ago in terms of the timing of the runoff from our solid reservoirs here in Colorado. On the final image on the right, I used once before. This is a NASA image showing as a bubble all of the water in and on our planet. The smaller one to the right, which is hard to see here, is all the fresh water, including that in our glaciers and snow and ice. And the tiny blue dot that you can hardly see is the fresh water in our rivers and lakes that's available to us. And that tiny dot is just getting smaller and smaller as we deal with climate change. So not a very uplifting ending to my conversation, but it really underscores the work we have to do here to preserve, conserve, and reuse the water we're blessed with here in the state of Colorado. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Director Vasquez. And again, congratulations on your reappointment.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for her? Okay, well, what I'd like to do is we have a break scheduled. Unless anyone really objects, I'd like to make that just a 5-minute bio break, so to speak, because I don't think, we're not going to be having hallway conversations and such. So if we could make that a quick one, and then we'll be coming back. We won't be doing the building tour, obviously, and we won't be doing lunch either. we'll start with consent agenda item 2F that we needed to just clarify some things on, and then move through 17 through 21. So again, unless there's concerns about break time, let's just take 5 minutes, and or why don't we say we'll be back right at 10:30. We'll do 7 minutes and move on. Thanks. And if you recall, we needed to jump back to
Recording in progress.
needed to jump back to item 2F from the consent agenda, which was a South Platte Basin application that was listed as Sungate Systems for automated gate pipe control system field trial. Apparently there was just a couple things we needed to clear up on that. So I don't recall who's in charge of that one. It was
That would probably be Ben Wade. If you guys have any questions, that was one of his items.
okay.
If he's on, it would be great if Ben, do you see him on, Viola? It'd be nice if he could clarify what the issue was.
I do
Hey, Jen.
see him on there.
Yeah, good morning, Director Feld. This is Ben Wade, CWCB staff. And yeah, the clarification was the applicant registered through our portal with Sungate Systems, and between registering and filling out the application, yeah, I was just realized that they should have used North 40 Technologies as the applicant, because North 40 Technologies is going to be the one who can actually, or the entity that actually can contract with the state. But they'll be performing the tasks that were within the scope of work as North 40 Technologies, and following through with all the grant requirements in terms of reporting and invoicing. So if it was okay with the board, we were just gonna hopefully just make the change from Sungate Systems to North 40 Technologies, and then on the back end administratively, I can just change those things on the back end in the portal there.
So I guess what we'd like would be a motion to amend the agenda item and then to approve the agenda item.
Right, yeah.
And so, Ben, should we amend the agenda item so the applicant is North Fork Technology and Sungate Systems, or just North Fork Technology?
No, sorry about that. The request is to change the applicant from Sungate Systems to North 40 Technologies by itself. So yeah, this grant would be approved to North 40 Technologies as alone, minus the Sungate Systems. Sorry. But yeah, we would just approve the grant as North 40 Technologies for the project titled whatever the title was. But that would be the request to the board.
And one more comment, if I may, Director Felt. Ben, you spoke to the applicants yesterday and they confirmed this was the proper name to use. Is that right?
Yeah, yes.
Super. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Director Combs, and a second from Director Vasquez. Is that correct?
A second and a question, if I might.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we've modified to show North 40's technology. Is Sungate ending up as a subcontractor or involved in some way? I'm a little confused still. Could you edify us all, Ben?
Sure. Yeah, so this is a field test for this particular automatic gate valve project that North 40 would do the work for, and then the applicant said that if approved, and if this would ultimately, they're trying to get this as an NRCS equipped approved on the subsidy list. And that's where Sungate Systems would be involved later. But this first part of their project is all under North 40 Technologies as far as the field testing and the development side of it. So
it's basically demonstrating the technology?
Yes,
That's what we're approving?
right, right. Yeah, so it can, yeah, just again, just be a part of the subsidies with NRCS equip that can benefit not only the folks in South Platte, but hopefully kind of statewide as well with what they're proposing here. So,
But the intention is it will be beyond any kind of demonstration project. If
correct.
technology is well demonstrated, then it will move on to something bigger. And that's what you're alluding to NRCS about.
Right, exactly.
All right. I think I understand better now. Thank you.
Okay. So it's always tricky with these votes on Zoom, but the main thing, I guess, is making sure no one's opposed. So we have a motion and a second. So is there anyone opposed to this motion going forward? So we'll take that as unanimous support, and the motion is approved, Viola. Okay, thank you. Let's go to item 17, System Conservation Pilot Program Update with Amy and Michelle.
Good morning. For the record, this is Amy Ostick, CWCB staff. Good to see you all virtually, and it was nice to see you all in person for a little bit yesterday. I am here to talk about the System Conservation Pilot Program for 2024. And if you could go, excuse me, to the next slide, please. And I'll just give my standard disclaimer that I'm giving on all calls right now, which is that I seem to still be getting over a nasty virus that I had for a few weeks. So if I have to take a coughing break, I apologize. All right, so the System Conservation Pilot Program, I'm going to talk today about the 2024 SCPP and the projects moving forward through it. But I wanted to start by providing a few reminders and just setting some context for where we are and why we are here with the SCPP. So as a reminder, the SCPP was one component of the Upper Division State's 5-point plan that was adopted way back in July of 2022. As you recall, at that time, the reservoirs were hitting critically low elevations, and the Bureau of Reclamation was calling for 2 to 4 million acre feet of conservation in the Colorado River Basin. And as we all know, Colorado and the Upper Division states could not solve that problem on our own, but we came to the table and showed that we were willing to do our part and do what we could. And one component of that was the System Conservation Pilot Program. So you all know the idea here is temporary voluntary compensated reductions in upper basin consumptive use. And the purpose is to mitigate the impacts of drought in the upper basin. This program is federally funded through the Bucket 1, as we call it, of the Inflation Reduction Act. The program is implemented through a funding agreement between the Bureau of Reclamation and the Upper Colorado River Commission. And you know, it sounds similar in nature to the concept of demand management, but it is very different in nature in that it doesn't have the same monitoring, verification, shepherding requirements that any potential demand management program might have under the demand management storage agreement. And just another reminder that the program is only authorized through this year, through fall of 2024. We previously did this program back in 2015 through 2018. But the federal authorization that we have right now only goes through this year. Next slide, please. So the System Conservation Pilot Program is implemented through the Upper Colorado River Commission, by the Upper Colorado River Commission. But I want to be clear about the role of this board, which is that you all have had the opportunity to provide statutory protection to the water users who participate in SCPP by declaring the SCPP a state-approved conservation program pursuant to statute. And you all did that back in November. So thank you for that. The water users who are participating, I'm sure, thank you for that. And again, I'm here today just to give you an update of what has happened since then and what projects are moving forward. Next slide, please. So another kind of review here, we had a number of improvements in 2024 SCPP relative to last year. As you recall, when we were setting it up in 2023, we were scrambling with a very short time frame to get this program set up. So we had an opportunity to learn from how that went and do some things a little bit differently. The key things that we changed were first earlier timing. We started the process way earlier because we had the option to do that, the opportunity to do that. As you recall, the previous year we got federal authorization really late in the game, so it was really hard to do everything we needed to do in the time frame we had once that federal authorization came through. So we had the ability to do it earlier this year, and we did. We also had this firm fixed pricing mechanism. So we had set prices for people based on their project type. That was, I will just say, ran much more smoothly than how we did it in 2023. The other big improvement is that we had pre-meetings that were required for prospective participants they had to meet with Wilson Water Group and talk about their idea for a project. And really, nail down what they were planning to do, what might work, what might not work in the context of this program. And that was really helpful. And I'll get to this a little bit later, but what we saw is that we were able to weed out some of the projects that just weren't going to work early on, so that we didn't have quite as many applications that we had to say no to. So that was helpful, I think, to participants. And then we also had the opportunity for interested parties in Colorado to review Colorado applications. So one of the things that we heard last year was that people really wanted an opportunity to review the applications before they moved forward, and we were able to provide that this year. And finally, the focus of the SCPP this year and the priorities were really informing the demand management feasibility investigation or supporting innovation and local resilience through these projects. Next slide, please. So just want to talk a little bit about the timeline, how the process has gone, and highlight some of the things that we were able to do this year that I think really improved the process, kind of fleshing out what I just talked about in the last slide. So we started a lot earlier in September, really early October. That gave us the opportunity to do some more targeted outreach. So we put on some webinars here in Colorado, made the rounds to the basin roundtables, made sure that we were just out talking to anyone who might want to know about SCPP. And then again, we had these pre-meetings with Wilson Water Group, where people who were interested in participating had to meet with a consultant to really talk about their project and see how it might fit or not fit within SCPP. And that was really helpful because there were a lot of inquiries that came in, and Wilson Water Group was able to say, hey, that might fit. Hey, we might have some issues here, some questions that we need to work through. And that really improved the quality of the applications that ultimately got submitted. So one thing that you'll notice this year is that the number of applications submitted relative to those that were approved is that gap is smaller relative to last year, because again, the applicants had already talked to Wilson Water, knew what information they needed in their application, things like that. So this board approved System Conservation Pilot Program in November. Back in November 2023 is a state approved conservation program. So folks knew going in that they would have that level of protection. And then we took applications through December 18th, 2023. And then that's when a pretty extensive review process was underway. You've heard from Jason Ullman yesterday, and I just have to give a huge, huge, huge shout out to DWR. I know that they worked really, really hard to look at these applications, to answer a lot of questions, and really to ensure that these projects were not going to cause injury. So again, DWR, CWCB staff, and staff across the upper division states were reviewing applications. And in that same time frame, we provided all the applications that we received to anyone who was interested in receiving them, any Colorado application to those who are interested in receiving them, with only personal identifying information redacted. So we sent those out. We took comments through the end of January. And then after that, we continue to go through the review process. And if we can go to the next slide, please. until March 4th, when the Upper Colorado River Commission met to consider which projects to move forward with. So that happened March 4th. Director Combs, I'm super distracted by your super adorable dog. I always love dogs in Zoom. Sorry, just had to note that. The Upper Colorado River Commission considered projects to move forward on March 4th. And then going forward, we're going to be working on getting, as Jason said, we have so many fun new acronyms, getting SCIAs, System Conservation Implementation Agreements, in place with those that are moving forward. Next slide, please. So I just want to pause here and say that we, I think largely because of those improvements that were adopted this year, got a lot of positive feedback on SCPP. We were hearing pretty good things from people that we were talking to about, the clarity of the process, their desire to participate. So we feel like these improvements were really pretty effective. And that resulted in more applications, not only in Colorado, but across the Upper Basin, and more projects ultimately moving forward this year. So I did just want to show, relative to 2023, what we're looking at in 2023, we had 64 total projects across the Upper Basin. This year, we're looking at 115 projects across the Upper Basin, and 50 of those are in Colorado. And conserved consumptive use estimate for Colorado projects, you can see here just north of 16,000 acre feet. And it is exciting to see that number, over 8.8 million federal dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act coming into Colorado. So that's great. So again, this just shows projects by state, estimated conserved consumptive use and acreage. Again, a lot more than last year. Next slide, please. I apologize, it looks like it's a little bit blurry, but just wanted to show you all, because I knew you'd be curious, the projects by basin in Colorado and the conserved consumptive use by basin in Colorado. So that is that, and you'll also see that we have 7 projects that are Colorado, Wyoming projects and a little state. Next slide, please. So that's kind of where we are in the process. These projects have been approved by the UCRC to move forward. And what we're working on now is getting the SCIAs in place and executed, along with the verification plans that show, what the actual project activity is and how it will be verified. And I also have to give a big shout out to Andy Nisevich in the AG's office, who has just been so incredibly helpful at getting all of these in place and helping move this through the process. So big thank you to Andy. And the next step relative to this board is that we are going to provide you with all of those executed implementation agreements once they're in place. So be on the lookout for those. They should be coming soon. And then finally, we'll have a final report on SCPP 2024 coming in March of 2025. And again, just a reminder that this program is only authorized at this time through fall of 2024. So I think that's everything I have on SCPP. If you could go to the next slide and make sure I'm right about that. And I'm happy to take any questions y'all might have.
Hey, thank you very much, Amy. Looks like we've got a question from Director Vasquez.
Yeah, quick question, Amy. I imagine there's some conversations going on about another year of this. Do you have anything to share regarding the opportunity for a second year?
We've been really focused on other things. Director Vasquez is what I'll say. That is
really, I can't imagine why.
I do want to just clarify, this was the second year that we've done it. And like I said, right now we only have that federal authorization through fall of 2024, and that is not a discussion that we're having right now about continuing it forward into next year. We've been really, really focused on post 2026 and talking about kind of that context. So we will keep you updated if any of those discussions do occur, though.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Director Boucher.
Thank you, Chairman Felt. Thanks for the presentation, Amy, and thanks to everybody for their work with SCPP this year. And Amy, thanks for dealing with me for the last month. I guess more really the last like 7 years, but just to give the board a little bit of background on this, one of the projects when we got the list is very local to where I'm sitting right now, and potentially has impacts to neighbors and even one of the ditches that we operate. And so there's a little bit of personal connection to where some of these questions come from and some of my interest in this given this year. So if you take SCPP alone, Amy, and say, I understand that we don't currently have a reauthorization, but we kind of have the SCPP conversation, and then we have water conservation projects in general. And when we look at what you have all learned, and then as we have kind of watched this process go, and we might have some input or suggestions about ways to streamline or improve or kind of work on it. And I don't want to overstep understanding, the role of system conservation, but knowing other conversations regarding water conservation potentials within our state. How do you see this interaction with the board? I mean, would you prefer individual conversations with you? I know ultimately that we'd like to inform Commissioner Mitchell. I know, the involvement of Wilson Water Group, and I talked to Jason yesterday, for the extent of the entire break about some of the activities with Division of Water Resources. I feel while you all must be exhausted and aren't even through the SKIA process yet, I still feel like there's some dialogue that if we're really trying to learn from this, and again, I'm not trying to overstep, but I've just been fascinated from it for a long time, as you know, with our original water conservation project that we'll actually be having a gathering here on Monday about. So what do you recommend for me, to give some input in writing, or do you think that hosting some kind of a forum or private conversation with you? I'm up for anything, but I just feel like I have enough on my mind. I don't want it to be forgotten over a period of time.
Yeah, thank you, Director Boucher, for that question. And I appreciate it. And it's something I've been thinking about too, which is, we now have 2 additional years, additional to the first 4 under our belt on SCPP. And I think the time is right to really think about lessons learned and, what went well and what didn't. And, going forward, we currently don't have authorization for SCPP next year, but in programs like this, whatever you call it, what has SCPP taught us, and what are the things that we might need to be aware of and really think about going forward, that might be implicated if there were a longer term project or even another, 1 year type program. So I think that's a great idea. And I wonder if it would be appropriate, in the near future to have and I'm trying to think a little bit about the appropriate kind of forum for that discussion, but I think it would be really helpful to hear from this board based on what you're hearing from, people in your basins, water users. So, for now, I would appreciate you definitely tracking all of your thoughts and sharing them with us directly, but I also, it might be worth considering a future board agenda item where there is just an open discussion about lessons learned and your all thoughts on, what you've been hearing.
Yeah, I really like the sound of that, because, Maine STEM Colorado director, I've been fielding a number of questions about this. And I feel, it's important for us maybe to make sure that we're all on the same page about some of our talking points about it and what process looks like. And I think that lessons learned component, that if the community's here, that this really is an effort in, continuing to understand how things can be not only streamlined, but done as, kind of best management as possible. I think that would be a good message to the community. So, given all of these different processes and the agencies involved and Becky and UCRC, I know it's all a little bit confusing, but I think making sure that we're all on the same page would be a good thing. So I'll stay in touch, but I really do like the idea of maybe an agenda item in May.
Director Kozlov.
Thank you. I just want to maybe add to that thought in the same vein that if it's appropriate to record the lessons learned from this process and last year's too. I think that I'd like to see the DWR staff be able to give their input on, you know, what went well and what could be done better in the future. I'm sure they'll have thoughts. And I think too about your presentation, Amy mentioned a March 2025 report about the program. I don't know if that report is an appropriate place to record any of that information, but I thought I'd mention it as a possibility. So thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Director Kozloff. And one thing I'll note about that March 2025 report is that that'll be an upper basin-wide report that I think Wilson Water will likely help with. And I see there being value in a kind of separate, distinct Colorado-focused effort, because the issues here are distinct from, in some cases, really different from the states, the issues that the other states might have. In some cases, there are certainly parallels, and of course, there's some overlap there. But I do see value in just doing kind of a Colorado-focused effort on that, and I think that this board, in my opinion, would be an appropriate place to have that conversation. And I love the idea about DWR and the folks that you all had involved, bringing their expertise to that as well, and their experience and input.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on SCPP? If not, Amy, will keep you in the hot seat here and move on to Colorado River updates.
Great, thank you so much. Again, for the record, it's Amy Ostick again, CWCB staff, for agenda item 18, Colorado River updates. If you could go to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So I am here today to update you all and talk through the Upper Division States alternative that was just submitted March 6th for post-2026 operations of Lakes Powell and Lake Mead. So I'm excited to talk through the details and provide an opportunity for some discussion and questions, because I know it's a pretty complicated subject. But before doing that, I did want to just set the stage, again, provide a little bit of context for where we are in this process, where we're going next, and just offer a really quick reminder that the reason that we're doing this is that the current operational guidelines for Lake Powell and Mead, the 07 interim guidelines, expire in 2026. So as you all are very well aware, Commissioner Mitchell and the team have been really focused on learning from the operational experience that we have of the 07 guidelines and considering how we can do better in the post-2026 world. So to that end, as part of this NEPA process, the Bureau of Reclamation has initiated, they invited people to submit alternatives by March 11th. The Upper Division states, I'm proud to say we're ahead of that curve. We actually submitted our alternative to reclamation on March 6th. Here's the thing I want to emphasize. This is one point in the process. It's an important point. We're excited about where we are and what we've submitted, but the discussions will continue beyond this. And Colorado and the other Upper Division states remain committed to staying at the table, engaging with the basin states, and continuing to work towards a shared 7-state consensus position for the post-2026 operations of Lakes Powell and Lake Mead. That being said, we're excited about what we have submitted, and so I'm going to jump into talking through that proposal. Next slide, please. I want to start with the overarching goals of the Upper Division States alternative, and this really goes back to Commissioner Mitchell's negotiating priorities, those irrefutable truths that you all are very familiar with at this point, that were developed in coordination with water users and others across the state and with this board. And as you, I'm sure, recall, a key component of those negotiating priorities and irrefutable truths was that we need to live within the means of the river, and we need to set operational guidelines for Lake Powell and Lake Mead that are actually responsive to hydrologic conditions. Operational guidelines that are designed to protect water users, provide certainty, to rebuild storage at our nation's 2 largest reservoirs, and to do that all while operating within the law of the river, including, importantly, the 1922 Colorado River Compact. So that's where really how we were coming at this was with the foundation of those irrefutable truths or negotiating priorities. And I'm going to talk a bit about how the Upper Division States alternative really fits well within the context of those negotiating priorities. So next slide, please. So our alternative has two, I would say, main components, and that's operations of Powell and operations of Lake Mead. We have provided modeling parameters for how those two reservoirs should operate going forward. There's also a section in the alternative called parallel activities, and I'm going to talk about that, but I want to make clear that that concept of parallel activities, it's called parallel activities because it's outside the scope of the post-2026 operational framework. Post-2026 operations, this whole process is really focused on the operations of Lakes Powell and Mead. We recognize that there are other things that we might do should our alternative be adopted that could complement those operations, but again, they're outside the scope of this process and would be considered under separate processes and agreements. So I'm going to zoom in on each of these parts of our alternative now, and I'll start with Powell releases. If you go to the next slide. So again, you know that a major theme for Colorado and that the other Upper Division states also have shared is we need Powell operations that are responsive to hydrologic conditions. We cannot continue to operate the reservoir with this huge mass balance problem where we have more water leaving the reservoir than is going in. That is not a recipe for sustainable management. So our proposal for Lake Powell is designed to be responsive to hydrologic conditions and help rebuild storage at that reservoir. And this is how it would work. Every year on October 1st, you look at how full Lake Powell is, you look at the contents of Lake Powell, and based on how full Lake Powell is, that's going to tell you what the release from Powell is going to be in the following year. Importantly, this is done on a continuous and linear rule curve. And I'm just going to contrast that with the 07 guidelines where we saw these huge deviations and discontinuities between tiers, where a small amount of water, a foot of elevation change in Lake Powell or Lake Mead could mean the difference to the tune of 1 million acre feet of releases from Lake Powell. So that we thought was not a good way to operate the reservoir, where just that little bit of difference could make a huge difference in the amount of water being released. So again, this avoids those sharp deviations between the tiers on this continuous and linear rule curve, also does away with balancing releases. And again, you're looking at the contents of Lake Powell, October 1st, and based on that, you're setting the release of Powell. And here's a table that shows exactly what that would look like under various conditions at Lake Powell. So that's Lake Powell. And next slide, please. I'm going to move to Lake Mead. The concept for Lake Mead, again, it starts on October 1st. On October 1st, you're going to look at the contents of both Lake Powell and Lake Mead. You're going to subtract out what we're calling a threshold volume, which is a certain amount of water in those reservoirs below a certain elevation at each of those reservoirs. So you're going to look at current live storage as your numerator, and your denominator is going to be total live storage, again, subtracting out that threshold volume. You're going to take that times 100, and you're going to get what we call a trigger. So that trigger percentage, based on the contents of Lake Powell and Lake Mead together, is going to then determine the extent of lower basin reductions. And so as the reservoirs drop in contents, as that trigger gets lower, you're going to see larger reductions called for in the lower basin. What you see here is that in most circumstances, you're going to have a 1.5 million acre foot reduction in lower basin uses, but it also recognizes that sometimes that's not going to be enough. So as the reservoirs get lower, you're going to see increased reductions in lower basin uses up to an additional 2.4 million acre feet. So that's Lake Mead. And next slide, please. Here's another really key concept, and I think one of the most important concepts that is ingrained in the Upper Division States alternatives and is really foundational to an understanding of the Upper Division States alternative, and that is hydrologic shortage. The Upper Division States alternative acknowledges that in the upper basin, because we rely on snowpack, because we don't have massive reservoirs, we are really living on the front lines of climate change and taking hits every single year to our water supplies. Our water users are taking uncompensated shortages every single year. What this means is that we're using 3 to 4 million acre feet less than our compact apportionment every year. And to really frame this up and help folks understand it, we did do some work among the Upper Division State technical folks. So big thanks to Michelle and Brian. I should have said that earlier, not only for this, but for their work in really shaping this alternative. But I think this is important to note that they've really worked on looking at how do you begin to quantify that hydrologic shortage that we experience in the upper basin. And I want to take a moment and really emphasize that it's highly variable. So the average can be a little bit deceiving because it changes so much year to year based on hydrologic conditions. Some years it's going to be a lot more than this, some years it's going to be less than this. But on average, upper basin water users are facing shortages of 1.2 million acre feet in the upper basin. That's a big number. And what that means is that is the average of, if you were to look at full demands, if folks got all the water that they needed relative to what they actually got, you're going to average a difference of 1.2 million acre feet for upper basin water users. So how does this relate to the upper basin alternative? Well, some people might look at our alternative and say, it looks like you're only accounting for shortages or reductions in use in the lower basin. And what we're saying in response to that, what is the reality in response to that, is that we're already taking those shortages. We are participating. We are taking shortages through hydrologic shortages, through the prior appropriation doctrine and administration of water rights pursuant to it. We are already on that ramp with them, taking our shortages as well. So that is how we're, how the concept of hydrologic shortages is reflected in the Upper Division States proposal. Next slide, please. So this might be a good time to mention that the lower basin states also submitted a proposal. And I want to be clear that we still have a lot of analysis and modeling work to do and discussion. So I don't want to offer thoughts today on how that lower basin alternative performs or any kind of holistic analysis of it. But I do want to be candid that you're going to see a couple differences right at the outset. And one of them is that concept of, who's taking the cuts and when. And again, what I want to emphasize here is that we already are taking the shortages. So our alternative recognizes that. The lower basin states alternative calls for additional cuts to upper basin water uses. So that's one difference. Another difference that you're going to see is the which reservoirs you're considering when determining Powell and Meade operations. So I'm sorry, I totally just jumped ahead of myself. Can we go to the next slide and then we'll come back to this parallel activities section. So just to kind of round out the explanation of the Upper Division States alternative and how it differs a little bit from the lower basin, here's another thing that you're going to note that is different, which is that the lower basin looks at full system contents when determining operations of Powell and Meade. They're looking at the contents of our upstream initial units and determining those operations. And in contrast, as I just explained, we're only looking at contents of Powell and Meade to determine operations. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward and simple. It is that our upstream initial units are not authorized for lower basin uses, so they shouldn't be considered in determining lower basin supplies. As you all are aware, much of the water stored in those upstream initial units is already designated for other uses and environmental compliance in many cases. So the other question that we get is why October 1st to determine operations of Powell and Meade in the Upper Division States alternative? And I just want to take a moment to explain that. The first thing I'll note is that we opted for a date certain when operations would be determined, because under the 07 guidelines, what we have seen is projections that are 6 months in advance that determine what the operations will be. Those projections can be really unreliable. They can be wrong frequently, and what we've seen is that they frequently release or result in higher releases from Powell than would have occurred based on real-time conditions. So we said October 1st, you look at the contents of the reservoirs. That's what's going to set your operations. This date in particular provides an opportunity to account for the runoff that has occurred and see what that looks like in the reservoir. It also falls before lower basin contractors are putting in their water orders. So, you've heard the concept. I think Commissioner Mitchell has talked a lot about living within the means of the river, living within the budget, right, of what the river is providing in a given year. And setting this October 1st date provides an opportunity for the lower basin states to get some operational certainty and to set their budget accordingly. So they see what the releases are going to be from Lake Powell and Lake Mead and can adjust their water order deliveries accordingly after that date. So that's why October 1st. And now I'm going to ask you to go back a slide. And I apologize for that. But now, having explained how the operations of Powell and Mead would work under the Upper Division States alternative, I want to take a minute to explain this concept of parallel activities. I wonder if it's possible to go back a slide. There we go. Thank you so much. So again, it's important to understand that the scope of the post-2026 operational guidelines is Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So that's what we're really focused on in terms of the modeling that, that we're providing, the parameters we're providing. It's really focused on that. But there is a section in the Upper Division States alternative called parallel activities, which recognizes that there are activities outside the scope of those post-2026 operations that might complement a post-2026 alternative. And these are activities that if the Upper Division States alternative is adopted, the Upper Basin states might consider pursuing, including voluntary conservation efforts and potential releases and recovery at the upstream CRISPA initial units of Blue Mesa, Flaming Gorge, and Navajo. I want to make an important note here, which is that I know some of this might sound familiar, and relatedly, the 2019 drought contingency plans, which include the demand management storage agreement, the drought response operations agreement, those all expire in 2026, right along with the 07 guidelines. So what we're talking about here would be something different in the post-2026 world. And one thing that we are thinking about a lot is if we were to move forward with parallel activities, with concepts like this in the post-2026 world, we would of course want to learn from all the operational experience that we got from implementation of those agreements, like the Drought Response Operations Agreement. And we'd want to incorporate what we've learned in any future agreements going forward. And on that note, it's important to understand that those, again, this would be outside the scope of the post-2026 process, subject to separate agreements in the future. So separate from post-2026 and separate from also the 2019 DCPs, which will expire in 2026 as well. And any such parallel activities would need to be done to protect Lake Powell's continued ability to make releases and to protect upper basin interests. So those are some key kind of guiding principles in terms of what those activities might look like as well. And finally, the Upper Division States alternative acknowledges undeveloped, settled tribal water rights that are currently flowing downstream. And now if you can skip forward 2 slides. So that is the Upper Division States alternative in a nutshell. I know that was a lot of information. But the other important thing that is noted right in the alternative itself and that we want to really emphasize is that we are really committed to continued collaboration. Commissioner Mitchell is very committed to being at the table, talking to the lower basin states and all the basin states and others within the basin going forward. We continue to believe that collaboration is the best path forward. And so the work will really focus on, can we get to that 7-state consensus alternative in the future? So we are very committed to continuing that discussion. Next slide, please. Finally, I just wanted to give a shout out to our website where we have put all the information you might need, anyone might need about the alternative. We have the submittal package there. We have an infographic we developed, the FAQ document we've developed, a press release, all on this new kind of landing page for the alternative. And I want to give a big shout out again to Michael who has really helped kind of lead the charge on pushing all this information out. Emily Zemak on my team, and Carolyn Kemp, who was up at a ridiculous hour in the morning to help us get all this launched. So all of this was really a huge team effort, and I'm just very grateful to those who helped get this out. I think that's everything I have. You go to the next slide, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, are there questions for Amy? Director Cloud?
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Great presentation. I know a lot about kind of what's going on with the alternatives and the lower basin's alternative as well too. But I know that the lower basin is very vocal, putting out a lot of media coverage on these two. Are you all planning on putting out more media coverage as far as like what the upper basin is doing, especially with the the Citizen Conservation Pilot Program, because that is showing we've been taking those cuts and we're continuing to take those cuts, where they're saying that we're not taking any cuts whatsoever, and that it's only the lower basin that's going to be cutting back on their structural deficit, which we all know is their overuse. So I was just wondering about that to help our people understand what's really going on in the basin.
Thank you so much for that question, Director Cloud. And I'm glad you asked it, because I should have mentioned a few things. Yes, is the answer. We are taking very seriously the communication side of this. And again, Michael has been instrumental in helping to get our message out there and keeping track of all the media messages that are coming in so that we can start to make sure that we're tailoring our message appropriately. We actually held a press conference the day that this was released, which was a new experience for me. And but we thought it was pretty effective at helping to get our message out. But we have to keep working. And Michael is constantly thinking about new ways to do that. One thing I'll note is that we have a webinar coming up next Tuesday, where we're planning to talk about exactly all the things that you mentioned, the Upper Division States Alternative, System Conservation Pilot Program. The other thing that we're really looking at and thinking about is how we can highlight the stories of shortage in the Upper Basin, because I think that's a key. What we're realizing is that that's a key misunderstanding. You know, I feel like I have talked about hydrologic shortage until I'm blue in the face. We all have, but people don't understand how that connects to the limited options that we have in the Upper Basin and how we're already contributing every single day. So we're really looking at how can we tell those stories of shortages and then connect them to the Upper Division States Alternative and some of the messaging we're doing on that. So Michael is working hard on that, and any ideas or thoughts that you all might have on getting that message out as well, we would be very, very happy to hear them.
Director Vasquez.
Thank you, Chair Felt. Amy, again, great presentation. Really straightening out some of the misunderstandings some people have about the Upper Division States proposal. Following on Commissioner Cloud's comment, a webinar is a self-selected audience. So question, what are we doing to make sure that our state legislators are thoroughly informed and the general public, trying to get reporters to place pieces in the general public's view?
Thank you, Director Vasquez, for that question. And I'll make a couple of notes. One is that we actually have I can't remember exactly what it's called, but an opportunity to get before some lawmakers, I think in early April, to talk about this, which will be great. And I think Jayla maybe talked briefly about that yesterday. So we're going to be doing that, but also looking at opportunities for more, individualized outreach to lawmakers to make sure that they have the ability to ask the questions that they might have. So we are trying to address that on all fronts. And then the other thing I'll note is that Michael has really helped us develop a list of reporters of just all the people who may or may not be interested in Colorado River issues, and making sure that the information about our webinars, about our media conference, about things like that are getting out to that full list of people. So we saw, I think on our last webinar, I can't remember, I was shocked at the amount of people that were on. And I think it is because she shared it out with so many people who wouldn't have known about it otherwise, but are interested. So she is constantly adding to that list of people, and we're seeing more and more people come every single time we do something like this. So that's pretty exciting to see. But again, it's always a work in progress, and we're always working to expand our audience.
Sure. And I know it takes a lot of time, but those one-on-ones with both state and national legislators, this, of course, is a global discussion going on with a lot of focus on the Colorado River. And I know that's a really heavy lift trying to make sure people have the right understanding of what you're doing.
And I can't believe I didn't mention that Commissioner Mitchell was actually in DC the week that this all went out, with the other Upper Division state commissioners meeting with the senators of the Upper Division states and others. So they were really focused on explaining our alternative on that level, and I think we'll continue that engagement going forward.
Great, thanks.
Hey, Director Brody.
Thanks, Director Felt. Amy, thank you, and Becky and the entire team for your tireless work advocating on behalf of Colorado, our water users, and the entire Upper Division. I know you mentioned the continued desire to collaborate among the various states and obviously the federal government and Mexico as well. And I know we're not going to get into the details of the lower division proposal, but I think it's pretty obvious on the face of the two proposals that they're coming at this from very different perspectives and proposing very different ideas for how to solve the challenges we're facing. And I'm just curious, from a process standpoint, what does that collaboration look like going forward, to the extent that you can share that? How do we kind of work through these two very different perspectives to hopefully come to some type of resolution that everyone can live with?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Director Brody. And I think for us, the very first step is completely analyzing and understanding the lower basin's proposal, the implications, and all of that. And I'm hopeful that in the near future we'll have the opportunity to sit down with our lower basin counterparts and just ask some questions, starting with clarifying questions to make sure that we really understand the two proposals and what they say and what they don't say. And, from there, hopefully we can find some areas of common understanding or common goals. So I think in the very near future, it'll just be a matter of making sure that we understand each other and what we're saying. But like I said, I really do sincerely hope that after that we can identify where we might have some similarities and start from there. So I don't know that I can provide much more detail at this point on the process going forward, but I'm hoping that at least now we have kind of a starting point, a launching off point for that discussion. So that's what I'm hoping.
Director Kozlov.
Thanks, Director Felt. I just thought I'd chime in that conversation on the Colorado River with the legislature is going to be at the Capitol on April 3rd, organized by WECO. So just giving you all the date for that.
Okay, Director Romero-Haney.
Thank you, Chairman Felt. And just building upon that, we are also working to coordinate briefings with individual legislators that have expressed interest in it, key legislators, particularly those on the West Slope. So getting back to your question, Director Vasquez, we're really trying to do as much outreach. I think the announcement launched very quickly last week, so we're just kind of catching up now. But that we recognize that's just really important to work closely with our partners over at the General Assembly.
Amy, I have a couple questions for you. One, I think, is a pretty simple one, which is just, you used the term threshold volumes, I don't know, 3 or 4 slides back. Can you just define what you mean by that?
Sure. So just to be clear, the concept of the threshold volume comes into play with the operations of Lake Mead, where we look at contents of Powell and Mead together, we subtract out a threshold volume, and then use that to get to this trigger percentage. And what I will say is that we used certain elevations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead that Reclamation has provided in previous planning efforts, that we really used as a modeling tool to say, this is the amount of water that we should subtract out when we're considering what the actual live storage of Lake Powell and Lake Mead are, if that makes sense. And if you total them together, I believe it's 8.7 million acre feet total in the two reservoirs together that comes out when looking at what we're going to consider for that trigger.
So are these volumes then that are sort of like conservation pool or dead pool that like you don't want to count as sort of active storage?
That is a good way to think about it. And I want to be clear that we're using elevations that Reclamation has put out in previous planning efforts. You know, when it comes to determinations that Reclamation is making about their infrastructure or various elevations that are relevant to them, we leave that to them, but we're borrowing those elevations that they have put out previously, again, based on the information that is relevant to the question you just asked, and look at the actual storage contents below those. So yeah, yes, it's a short answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Amy? All right, well, thank you for those two comprehensive reports, Amy. Let's see, next up is item 19, special release of the Colorado Watershed Restoration Program update with Chris Sturm.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Chris Sturm, CWCB staff for the record. Hopefully you're seeing my slideshow. I have an update of the special release of the Colorado Watershed Restoration Program, which we use to launch the Wildfire Ready Watersheds program. I know that many of you have seen some version of this presentation. I promise that I've got some new slides in here that show an update of where we are with the grant program. But I did want to run through some of the slides that many of you have seen before for the benefit of our new board members and others that may not have seen this. But Wildfire Ready Watersheds was born out of Senate Bill 21240, where the General Assembly tasked us with assessing the susceptibility of our water resources, communities, and critical infrastructure to post-wildfire impacts. While doing this for the General Assembly to satisfy the bill, we also developed a framework, a template scope of work for communities to do this type of planning, but at a much more local scale with more detailed data. And I'm going to be talking about those plans today. We refer to those as Wildfire Ready Action Plans. What we did for the statewide susceptibility and what's happening in these local Wildfire Ready Action Plans, or RAPs, is that we look at our values at risk in the watershed, and we look at the potential for post-wildfire hazards, and where those two things intersect is where we're susceptible. At the statewide scale, we did this at a very small watershed unit called a Huck 12. This is a watershed that's about 10 to 40,000 acres in size. And we looked at all these major values at risk statewide. Life and property near floodplains, road crossings, our infrastructure, all our water infrastructure, as well as some aquatic ecosystem data that we got from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. When we put this together, we didn't start from scratch. We've learned a lot in post-wildfire recovery. And one thing that we learned in post-wildfire recovery is that it's really hard to innovate for multi-objective projects. People are trying to move very quickly. It can be very difficult to get permitting on federal ground to implement projects because we have to respect the NEPA process. And we were constantly thinking, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could get a lot of these things done before fire? They'll help mitigate post-wildfire floods, but they'll also help with a lot of other objectives we have. watershed health. And so what you're looking at here was a model that we did after the East Troublesome Fire, where we built a hydrologic model to show how the runoff was going to change after the fire because of the burn severity. And then Grand County and the Northern District gave us information about where homes and critical facilities were located and where water infrastructure was located. And so using our hydrologic model and that information, we came up with this map to show the stakeholders where they're most at risk from flooding and debris flows after the fire, where the values at risk were susceptible. And this was used to implement the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program, where NRCS and locals go out on the ground and identify areas that they need to build mitigation projects. So this really helped them focus in on where those areas were. Here's the statewide susceptibility map at that HUC 12 scale. Just to show us, we go from green to red. That means increasing presence of values at risk and increasing presence of the likelihood of post-wildfire hazards. The way I'm interpreting this is anything that's yellow to red is a pretty high priority for us. And even some of these green areas are high priority. They may have just one value at risk, but that could be the water supply for a small community. So that doesn't make it any less important. Here's the same data aggregated by county. I find that some folks have an easier time understanding it this way. And you can really get an idea of where the bullseye is and where we need to focus a lot of work. We have all of this data on the website for those of you that are interested in playing around with it. The example I have right here is just reservoirs susceptible to post-wildfire debris flows. So there's different ways to look at the data depending on your interests. The maps that I'm showing you, it's all of that data aggregated together. So a wildfire ready action plan, that's where we are in the grant program right now. We're getting a lot of interest in this program. More interest than I've ever seen in anything that I've launched for the board in the Watershed Health Program. And we'll talk about those applications here in a minute. But just as an overview, what is a wildfire ready action plan? What did we do? We actually just built a template scope of work that is of sufficient detail for our grantees to drop it right into a request for proposal to hire a consultant to do that work. This is about as prescriptive as we've ever been, but we think this is a really urgent program and we wanted to get folks out there quickly and get them beyond any kind of learning curve. But it follows a path of a lot of our planning in that we require stakeholders to come together. There is sufficient task around data collection and identifying gaps and developing new data if needed. We have to build some models to look at these hazards and then intersect those hazards with the value at risk data to see where we're susceptible. And then the last step, the most important step, is that it's not a plan unless folks are actually identifying mitigation activities, things they can implement before fire and things they should be looking at after fire. This is a new slide. Andrea Harbin Monahan with the Watershed and Flood Protection section put this together. And I think it's really helpful for folks to see because all of our planning efforts and tools that we built under the umbrella of the Watershed Health Program are designed to work together. And so in the top left there, you can see watershed planning. We start with that. What does that look like? Well, it involves stakeholders and collaboratives working together to develop visions and objectives of how they want to proceed. And at the very fundamental level of planning, we want to see assessments in hydrology, geomorphology, biology, and sometimes water chemistry. And that can lead to a lot of different types of planning efforts. What we have here at the top is stream management planning or integrated water management planning. Many of you have been involved in those processes. There's also an EPA 9 elements plan, which can be very similar to a stream management plan. The SWPP is source water protection planning. There's river corridor planning, and of course, what we're talking about today, wildfire ready action. And all of these things lead to project implementation. At the bottom there, we don't, at the board, do community wildfire protection plans, but we put that on here to show that there is a nexus between our wildfire ready action plans and the CWPPs, and they can be done together. One plan is about post-wildfire hazards. The other one's about mitigating wildfire itself. But if we look at those things together, there's a lot of commonalities and overlaps and ways to leverage funding for both things. Since I showed you a slide about the different planning that we do, I like to put this slide up to remind everybody, what are we trying to achieve when we're talking about healthy watersheds? And many of you have seen this before. The big one lately is that I've been talking to local groups about is we want resiliency for your watershed. We want your landscape to be able to resist, absorb, and recover from natural hazards, and to do that quickly so that you could get back to a normal flow regime that you're used to, and so we can protect your water supplies and habitats. Okay, here's the fun part. Here's the update for everybody. Right now, we have a total of $10 million to launch this program through ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan. It needs to be contracted before the end of the calendar. Stephen Reeves, Andrea Harbin, Monahan, and I have been incredibly busy out there soliciting applications from folks to get these wildfire ready action plans, these RAPs, underway. We have 8 of them active. We have 2 under review. The active ones are in the different colored polygons that you see on the map. There's a couple under review in Fort Collins and Pitkin County. Those are the pink stars, the big pink stars. And then there's a bunch of other big pink stars out there that aren't under review, but they're pending. And there's more than 6. I just made some updates today because I just found out about a couple more that I put on the map. So we're expecting applications from all of these pink starred areas. We have talked to these groups and got kind of an initial head nod. Yes, we want to proceed with one of these plans. We also have some projects out there. They're the little red stars. These are areas where there's already some really good planning in place and they're ready to implement some projects that are going to help protect from post-wildfire hazards as well as achieve other goals. Now, the bottom line on this is we're at a little over 3.3 million, and I told you I have till the end of the year to contract 10 million. I'm guessing another 1.5 million from these pink stars, so about 5 million. That's half of what we have. And while I see this map as a tremendous success for this program, I've never seen this many plans come in so quickly. It is darn tough to spend $10 million in planning as quickly as we've been tasked to do. We are working with some groups now to get some bigger projects underway. And we're also talking to stakeholders from the 2020 fires, East Troublesome and Cameron Peak and other fires, and saying if you still have needs to recover from those fires, this funding can be used for that. So we're hoping to get some bigger applications for implementation from those. And then I just want to direct your attention to Teller County, where you see a RAP taking place on the border of Teller and El Paso. Those are Colorado Springs Utilities Catamount reservoirs, and they are about to submit an application for implementation that I'm super excited about. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I just want to toggle you back and forth so you can see where we have these plans, they're pending plans coming in, and then see where we are highly susceptible. This is at a bigger watershed scale. And I think that we are doing a pretty good job of hitting a lot of these areas that are pretty susceptible to post-wildfire hazards. But we'll continue to work with folks, and we do plan on continuing to fund this program through the water plan grants, the watershed health category, once this ARPA funding is federal funding. So what does mitigation look like? I think many of you have heard me say that it's going to take a mosaic of different project types across the landscape to impart true resiliency. What does that mean? That means that we need more than just one project to protect this value at risk. And in this example, I have a hypothetical reservoir. And it's not going to just be, if you look at the top of the right, that little icon for fires, it's not going to just be prescribed burning. Or if you look at the top left, it's not going to just be forest treatments thinning. I put these types of forest health projects under the term fuelscape treatment. So you'll hear me say that a lot moving forward. Prescribed burns, thinning, planting for diversity, a lot of that is just fuelscape treatment. It's going to take fuelscape treatments along with what I'm calling riverscape treatments to get to the resiliency that we want to truly protect our values at risk. And riverscape treatments, there's examples of those on here as well. We see gully stabilization and wet meadow restoration. We had some projects yesterday that the board approved through the watershed health category that fit under this umbrella of what we're calling riverscape treatments. But there's also non-structural projects that can be done where we look at doing some fluvial hazard zone mapping so that we're not developing in these high-risk areas, as well as developing warning systems so that we can alert folks to floods and that we can inform decisions related to water quality as well. And then there's other types of projects that we don't generally fund, but we still want our stakeholders to be aware of them and talk to the right stakeholders, and that includes infrastructure upgrades. We have lots of problems with road crossings during floods. We don't have enough conveyance under bridges, and certainly culverts are a huge problem after fires. They're a huge problem in general when we have big rain events, flooding. And so we want folks to start inventorying those and talking to the right players, county, CDOT, as well as Forest Service, about making some changes before we experience disaster. So I hope this slide really helps you understand the strategy that we're trying to achieve at watershed scales and how these projects are linked to each other. The success of a wet meadow restoration project may hinge on some fuelscape treatments, upgrading of it, and some other types of treatments like gully stabilization upstream of it. It's not fair to just implement this one project and say this is going to help us, it's going to solve all our problems. After a fire, if that's the only thing we have, it's likely that that project will blow out. It may or may not succeed. So we have to design these projects to work together. I talked about Colorado Springs Utilities. They are a wonderful example right now, and we can use this slide to discuss what they're doing. They have reservoirs that are at risk, and they want to do just what I'm outlining here. They want to do fuelscape treatments along with riverscape treatments above their reservoir to protect it from post-wildfire hazards and sedimentation. And I'm super excited about them doing that. We don't fund fuelscape treatments, but when people bring this strategy to us, we are willing to count the fuelscape treatments as our required match to implement the riverscape treatments. And I really hope that that just drives this home for folks, because there is a lot of money out there right now for fuelscape treatments, and it can be leveraged to do some great things at watershed scales. This is an example of what that might look like in real life. We have an area here that does not need restoration. This riverscape is in wonderful shape. After a fire, it might serve very well to hold back and slow down flood flows and hold back debris. Picture a value at risk below this, like a reservoir or something. But this area is in need of some fuelscape treatments as well. So after fire, this floodplain area can't do it all. We need to mitigate the burn severity as well, and we do that through fuelscape treatment. And by mitigating that burn severity, ideally we don't have as big of an impact on our hydrological changes after fire. So that's it. I ran through it very quickly because I think a lot of you guys have seen that, but that's an update on where the grant program is, and I can take any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Great stuff. Is there any questions for him? Yeah, Director Boucher.
Thanks, Chairman Felt. Chris, I'm always impressed. I just think it was more than Grand County, certainly, but that summer and fall of 2020, felt so apocalyptic, and it's like, how do you go to some kind of a solution mode? And, at a scale of an agency like this one, the work that you're doing, just my hat's off to you, and appreciate it. And it builds a lot of hope for me. So thanks.
Thank you, Director Boucher.
Director Romero-Haney.
Thank you, Chairman Fell. I just wanted to express my gratitude to staff, to Chris Sturm, Kevin Hauk, their team. And it's incredible how they took the opportunity offered to us by the General Assembly initially when they called for the development of a statewide susceptibility analysis. And then when we were able to secure the special release of funding, the $10 million, when I see that map of how that money is making it onto the ground, I mean, it's incredible and it's precise and it's targeted. It is going to do so much to build resilience into our water supplies. So huge shout out to staff for their great work on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director Romero-Haney. We're pretty pleased with what we've done so far, but I would say let's save a lot of the accolades till we get to implementation and see how well we're doing then. I'm really optimistic. I'm very optimistic that it's going to go well, especially when I see examples like what Colorado Springs Utilities wants to do.
Awesome. Any other comments or questions for Chris? All right. Well, thank you, Chris, on behalf of all of us for all your work. This has really been an amazing development over the last several years. Okay, next up is item 20, the spring forecast with, I think it's with Kat Weissmiller.
Good morning. Yes, Kat Weissmiller for the record. I'm just trying to see if I have control, or should I just ask to advance the slides as I go?
Just ask to advance.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. I'll be presenting the spring drought and flood outlook today. This was originally an item that Emily Adrid and Kevin Hauk were going to present. Unfortunately, I'm standing in for Emily today. Her grandmother passed away unexpectedly, and so she's out today. So I'm kind of getting up to speed on the slides and hopefully can answer any questions you have, but we'll just jump into it. Next slide, please. So the overview for today's presentation is just a quick look back at Colorado drought conditions. We'll look at water year 2024 current conditions to date, the 2024 drought, fire, flood outlook, and then I'll just touch on a couple additional reminders of content and things that we've been working on. Next slide, please. I want to bring to your attention Colorado's drought conditions history over the 21st century. As you can see, and as many of us have experienced, the most severe drought conditions occurred in 2002, 2003, 2012, and 2013, and then in 2021 when 100% of our state was in at least D1 drought. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot of 2023 drought conditions. I want to note something somewhat rare that happened in 2023. On the week of July 4th, the U.S. Drought Monitor indicated that 100% of the state was not in drought, which was exciting. This was the first time that had happened since 2019, and as a result of a really wet winter and spring we saw last year. And then October was the start of water year 2024, and drier conditions crept back into the state in the Southwest in particular over the beginning of the water year 2024. Next slide. So current drought conditions. This is the current Colorado drought map. Drought maps are updated every Thursday, so this map was updated today. As in October, the southwest portion of the state is still experiencing drought conditions, especially the Rio Grande Basin. Next slide, please. Water year 2024 temperature and precipitation. The next several slides, this one included, I'll highlight what's been happening so far in water year 2024. Here's a look at the temperature and precipitation. October through February period was the 6th warmest start to a water year in the 129-year record kept by the Colorado Climate Center. The October through February period has been the 49th driest, so not quite as extreme, but still a drier than normal first 5 months of the water year, especially in the southwestern corner of the state. Next slide, please. Water year 2024 precipitation. This is another graphic that I like that really illustrates how much precipitation we've seen this year compared to the median, which is the bar on the far right. So far in 2024, we were pretty behind in precipitation accumulation, especially in October and November. We've been able to catch up to the median in January and February storms, and I think given today especially, we're well on our way to track or exceed median March accumulation. Next slide, please. Statewide snowpack. Now, this is a graph of statewide snowpack, and as I mentioned before, we struggled a bit at the beginning of the water year. We dipped below the 10% median snowpack in November and then again in early January, but the mid-January winter storm really brought the statewide snowpack averages up to just below the median. Today's snowpack statewide is 102% of median, which is the best it's been for almost the entire water year. Next slide, please. Basin level snowpack. This is a breakdown of basin level. We're ranging from 111% of median in the Yampa Green Basin to 85% of median in the Upper Rio Grande. Next slide, please. 2024 soil moisture. As you know, that's been an issue, especially over the last drought. Soil moisture was a major concern for us. And so here's a look at the top 10 centimeters and top meter of soil moisture across the state at the end of February. In both images, the south and western portions of the state are seeing drier than normal soils. The soils in the top 10 centimeters look a little bit better, so hopefully that top meter of soils will find a bit of alleviation as moisture seeps down. But generally, you know, we're doing okay on soil moisture this year, so we're feeling good about that. Next slide, please. Stream flow. So this is a look at statewide stream flows across the state. The green dots indicate normal stream flow levels, which we're seeing a lot of right now. It's statewide. However, there's a high concentration of orange and red dots indicating below normal stream flows in the southwest, which follows the precipitation and snowpack trend that we've seen on previous slides. Next slide. Reservoir storage. Reservoir storage looks pretty good across the state at the moment. The statewide average is 100% of median and ranges from 119% in the Upper Rio Grande Basin to 80% in the Eastern Arkansas Basin. Next slide, please. So this is the monthly drought outlook. And I'm going to kind of move now from reporting on kind of current conditions to date over the water year to looking ahead. The U.S. Drought Monitor's monthly drought outlook, this figure is valid for the month of March. Drought conditions will continue to persist in the Rio Grande Basin and pockets of the Colorado-Utah border and the Colorado-Wyoming border as well. The good news is that this map indicates that new drought developments are not likely anywhere in the state for the month of March, so that's great news. Next slide. And this is the monthly temperature and precipitation outlook for the month of March. When the outlook came out a couple weeks ago, we were happy to see that the green shading across the state indicated a greater likelihood of above average precipitation for Colorado. And it looks like today we're proving those precipitation outlooks to be correct. Next slide. The seasonal outlook, so this is a 3-month look ahead. There's much more uncertainty as we project further out, so it's harder to say with confidence what the anomalies might be here. But at this point, there are equal chances for Colorado to be below average or above average for both temperature and precipitation looking for the next 3 months. Next slide. This is our fire potential outlook, and this again looks 3 months ahead, so April, May, June. In the southeastern part of the state, there's an above normal potential for wildfires in April, but that higher potential does go away in May and June, so that's a relief to hear that. Okay, next slide. So key takeaways, water year 2024 started off warm and dry. January and February winter storms brought precipitation levels back to the median, and March accumulation has brought snowpack levels above the median. Drought is likely to persist in portions of southern Colorado and especially the Rio Grande Basin. And we'll go on to the next slide. I just wanted to plug a couple of additional reminders and things that we've been working on. As we've chatted about the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee, which was formerly the Water Availability Task Force, will meet next on March 19th. And that's a joint meeting, so that's got a flood outlook as well. So hopefully you can all tune in for that. That's always really interesting and helpful content. And then the Climate Change in Colorado report was released a couple months ago, and I know Director Sakata included some content in his report yesterday about that. If you've not read the report, I highly recommend taking a look at it. It's really a great report that outlines climate and hydrologic trends and projections. And I want to thank the board for their support in funding this report. It will not only be used by our agency, but by many inside and outside of government. So thank you very much for that. And go on to the next slide, please. I'll turn it over to Kevin. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kat. I hope everybody can hear me. My name's Kevin Hauk. I'm the chief of the Watershed and Flood Protection Section, and I just want to ask, how's everybody enjoying the snowstorm today? Working out good? Sorry I couldn't be with you yesterday. I'm recovering from knee surgery that I had last week, and as all of you know, of course, those of us who work with the weather control the weather, and I figured if I couldn't be there, then nobody could be there. So that's my effort to try to solve the water problem here on the, at least in the South Platte and probably Arkansas basins as well. Every year I do this with the water supply section, and it's always a difficult message to deliver because I'm asked to talk about the flood situation and what's going to happen in flooding. And it's always what I'm going to say that it's hard to predict flooding. Unlike with water supply, where we can look at snow that's on the mountain and even look at weather forecasts and climate forecasts coming up, flooding is just very hard to predict anytime in the future. About the only things that we can look at are a couple indicators. One being, what is the level of snowpack and how might that impact snowmelt runoff? And then we can look at the El Nino Southern Oscillation phase, which is transitioning now from an El Nino, an El Nino to a La Nina type event. And, you know, early in my time at the Colorado Water Conservation Board, we used to look at those ENSO phases back then. And I always used to kind of believe in the beginning, if it's a La Nina, it affects the northern part of the country. And if it's the El Nino, it affects the other part. But here in Colorado, we're kind of in the middle. And I think that the Colorado Climate Center is kind of dispelled that a little bit, and in their maps that they show, it really does show that Colorado tends to do better for most of the year in an El Nino phase. And since we're going out of that, I expect that to mean that the chances for heavy precipitation will be slightly diminished in most of the state as we head into the summer flood season. And I think that's especially going to be the case out on the Eastern Plains. So that's one thing that we can look at. As far as snowmelt runoff, there's a lot of attention that's placed on that every year. And I'll point out 3 years in particular that many of you may remember. There was 2011, which affected primarily the northern half of the state. There was 2019 that was throughout the entire state. And then just last year in 2023 that affected the western part of the state mostly. And what happened primarily during all 3 of those years, which is I think what tends to happen throughout our state, is even in periods of very high snowpack, we just seem to have climate and stream characteristics that can generally handle that runoff as it comes off. And there were a couple exceptions last year. You know, I guess Hayden and Dolores are the ones that immediately come to mind, and CDOT had some issues as well. But for all the snow that we had on the mountains last year, and a lot of the concern that I heard throughout the spring season, I think it's important to note we didn't get a presidential flood disaster off of the snowmelt runoff. What we got it from was in the near plains just east and south of Denver from extremely high rainfall that came primarily in the month of June. And I think that illustrates the flooding characteristics of our state in the sense that the vast majority of the floods that we have experienced throughout the state of Colorado's history have been from rain. And it's just very, very difficult to predict those at all in advance. So we're just going to have to see what happens this summer. But I think with the ENSO phase switching to a La Nina event, I think the threat for flooding is at least slightly diminished. One other thing I do want to mention is about wildfires. I heard some of the directors mention this during their director's report. In the watershed and flood protection section, we pay very close attention to fires. As I think all of us know, it's not just the fire that creates problems, but it's the increased flooding and debris flows in the years following the fire that creates problems for us. And it's worth mentioning that we've now passed the 3-year threshold for the last major fires that we had in the mountains, which was in the fall of 2020. And I have found over the years in responding to the after effects of these fires that 3-year anniversary is a very notable milestone. And we start to see very significant watershed recovery and less impacts following the fires. This is going to be the first year going into this flood season since 2017 that we have no recent major burn scars. And I'm very happy to report that. And I hope that continues and we don't have any fires as we move through this season. I will note that some burn scars do tend to hang on longer than that 3-year limit. As an example, the spring fire down in southern Colorado has been very stubborn in its recovery. And I would expect probably the Cameron Peak and the East Troublesome fire scars to continue to give us some problems just due to their size and severity. And the last thing I want to mention is I just want to put in a plug for our flood threat bulletin. This is a CWCB operation to provide daily forecasts for floods throughout the state. We run this from May 1st through September 30th. You can either find a link to this from our CWCB website, or you can go directly to it at coloradofloodthreat.com. If you haven't looked at it in the past or used it, I highly encourage you to check it out. You can subscribe to it so that you receive an email every day with the conditions for that day. We don't do warnings like the National Weather Service, but I think we do have better verification metrics than them on daily forecasts. And I think it's a very useful product. And that's all I've got to say on the flood topic. And I think at this point, Kat and I can take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Kevin and Kat. Are there questions? Director Wind.
Thank you. A question for Kat. Thank you for the presentation. I was curious on the stream flow map, new to me. Is that an accumulation of flow past a given gauge to date in the water year? Is that what's being reflected by each one of those dots and their associated color? I think it was about halfway through your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I was just pulling that back up. Kevin, jump in if you're more familiar with this content than me. As I said, I'm presenting Emily's content today. It looks like it's at specific gauges, but I'm not 100% sure, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Have to check with Emily.
Thank you very much.
Director Wind, I can say, just looking at North Platte, we only have one major gauge in the north, on the North Platte. It shows a measurement error of some sort, but I'm pretty sure that's what this map represents, is a particular gauge. Whether it's a cumulative flow or not, I have no idea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Any other questions for Kat or Kevin? Okay, well, thank you both for that. We'll move on to our final item, operational planning update with Anna Moss.
Thank you. So Anna Mosk, CWCB Deputy Director for the record. This is a follow-up item to something we've had on the agenda for about the past year almost, and for the benefit of our new board members. This is tied to Agency Action 510 in the water plan, which is to develop an annual operations plan that really helps identify targeted work for this board. And so we worked with a consultant over the past year to help us develop that. The outcome of those workshops are somewhat still in progress. One of those items Director Riss mentioned yesterday, which is the CWCB guide that Russ Sands and his water supply planning team are hard at work on. Part of that guide will also include a link to an annual calendar, and that kind of ties into this. So one of the items on the annual calendar is that every January, we will share with you all a report out from DNR's SMART Act hearing. And that also includes certain metrics that the CWCB is trying to hit and that we report to the General Assembly. And so we're currently working on the fiscal year 24-25 performance plan with the Executive Director's Office. So that should be finalized by July 1 of this year. So we're still in drafting mode. We did receive new guidance this year from the Governor's Office, and it had a few new suggestions, one of which is to really look at more long-term goals versus just year-to-year goals, and then also to focus on efficient services and high-quality customer service. And so that's kind of the lens by which we were looking at our updates to our goals. We're also looking at pivoting away from the metrics that were outlined in the 2015 water plan and really trying to align better with the 2023 water plan actions, which are more things that are within our control. And this is something that I think a lot of the board's familiar with. We've really struggled over the past few years trying to figure out what metrics make sense to us. We don't actually create storage. Certainly we were helping support it through funding, but we couldn't necessarily drive those outcomes. Certainly, we're not a water provider. We don't really get to pick projects, but we really get to be strategic with what we fund. So we do have that option. So I guess, maybe also for the benefit of the new board members too, because you weren't here as we were finalizing the new water plan, there was very much an intentional decision by the board to keep it as more of a visionary document, fold in the old objectives and targets, but really get rid of those hard numbers that we had in there. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll share with you kind of what we're thinking on these. So for next year's performance plan, we're looking at aligning our goals with the 2023 water plan and things that are within our control. So those are sort of the two things that we started looking at. And so the first one we're proposing is, and this would be really a 10-year goal for us, or I guess 9 years at this point in time, but advancing all 50 actions in accordance with the water plan. And that is our goal, right? That's what we say in the plan, that we're going to update it every 10 years. We've outlined these 50 things that the CWCB is going to work on. So we haven't hashed out all the details on the metrics that we'll report on, but the water supply planning team has a very robust tracking sheet, and they are tracking all of these actions. So we're brainstorming on the best ideas as to how can we be transparent with that progress and report out numbers that make sense to the public and to the General Assembly. And then the second concept that we're working on is looking at how we leverage our funding. Because that's really, I think, what's a lot of the control with this board is saying yes or no to those grants that come in. And so we have a draft goal to leverage all of the water plan grant funding that comes into us. That number is dynamic, right? Because it is based on sports betting revenue. So we were looking at maybe a percentage, and maybe 100% isn't the exact right number, but I think that we have done that in recent years. And so again, we're still working on what we would actually measure, but things that we're brainstorming on are potentially, dollars awarded versus dollars available, maybe even tracking our outreach efforts. We've done this in the past with certain WIGs where we track how many new grantees come into our program. So that's within our control. We have an amazing regional team that does a lot of outreach work, and that kind of ties back to this customer service goal in the governor's guidance documents. So those are our preliminary ideas right now. As I said, these are still drafts in progress. And I know just seeing these on a slide isn't a whole lot of time to digest this information. So I'd certainly be happy to email these to the board and collect input from you if you've got other thoughts or suggestions for me. But that is what I wanted to share with you today. So happy to field any questions if you have any.
Anna, I feel like Russ recently provided us some sort of a graphic, I guess you could say, that looked at those 50 agency actions and sort of gave a progress report on them in relation to the 10-year water plan life. If that's something that's available, that might be great to send out to the board and especially our new members, just to kind of extract those from the plan and focus our thinking on them.
Yeah, let me connect with Russ and see what we can get you all that would make sense. It's kind of a living document that probably changes on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis, but we'll get you something now.
Okay. Are there questions for Anna? Okay. Thank you for that update. And yeah, I think that might be nice just to have something for us to look at and think about. Maybe it might help us better consider how we may be able to individually plug in and provide whatever, specific help we can. So sounds good. Okay, well, that is our agenda for today. Lauren, did you have any thoughts here?
I was just going to mention, related to the operational planning agenda item, that all of the water plan actions, both agency actions and partner actions, are available in sort of a list form on the website. I can email that out to you all. I find it personally helpful to have it in front of me sometimes as we're out talking to people, to just remind myself what it is we said we'd do. So I'll send that around. That's an easily accessible list. It doesn't show what we've done and what we haven't done, but it is a nice compilation of everything we said we'd do.
Yeah, great.
But no, as it relates to the end of the board meeting here, I just hope you all wish you the best with the snow and any travel you might have to do in the next couple of days. I just got an alert that school is canceled again tomorrow. So I suspect that's true for the majority of the Front Range schools. So best of luck, parents, in keeping your children occupied for the next 48 hours. Stock up on hot chocolate.
Something like that. Well, thanks everybody for your flexibility and nimbleness here, as I think this worked out pretty well considering the circumstances. Again, to all three of our new or renewed members, welcome. Thanks for being with us. We got a great team going forward here, and we'll be in the Granby area in May. So we'll look forward to that. And anything else, Lauren?
No, I think you covered it. I appreciate everyone's flexibility too. Glad everyone made it to their home destination safely, more or less.
And Chair Felt, if I might, thank you to Viola and her team for their rapid response to our change in plans.
Yes, that probably is something that goes on behind the scenes at every meeting, regardless of the weather. But yes, Viola and team, very smooth recovery. Jackie,
And
you
Greg,
got something?
yeah, I was just gonna say, no chair gets away with a reign that includes 0 Zoom meetings. So you got yours in there, slid it in, was bound to happen. Great job being flexible.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, well, thanks everyone. We'll see you in a couple months, and enjoy the spring.